Are you searching for the best in online black radio? Then go to blacktalkradionetwork.com, helping you filter through the noise. Real talk, black talk.
Calm down, Oscar. What happened to your face?
Dark butter. She always listening. Too damn smartphone, good. Preschool said we should think about starting her in school early. She didn't tell you that. Yeah, we'll put her in a private school. Uniforms. I was looking at St. Beat the other day, and they got this new thing where they start them off speaking Spanish, and they put them back on English.
I'm not coming here anymore.
What?
I'm not coming here for these visits anymore. This is my last time.
I know. I know this is the last time for me, too. I told you that. I ain't going down no more.
You want to keep putting Sophina through this, and you go right ahead. Okay? But Tatiana, that baby doesn't deserve this, Oscar.
Young knows what's going on.
So I guess that's why she asked me why you love taking your vacations more than you like being with her.
She ain't say that.
Oh, so I'm a liar now.
Ma, you gotta tell her I love her. Tell her I ain't never gonna
Tell her
leave
yourself. The next time you call home, you tell her yourself. Or better yet, let her come visit you here.
Yeah, but I don't... She don't need to be exposed.
You already exposed it. You already exposed it to this.
So you gonna leave me? You gonna leave me again? What kind of mom is you? You gonna fuck around and leave me in here? You ain't never had my fucking back anyway. I'm in here by myself.
I love you, Oscar.
You don't love nothing.
I do. And I'm praying for you. I'll see you when you get home.
Hey, Ma, hold up. Let me get a hug, Ma.
Grant,
hey, Ma, I can't get a hug.
Back to the visiting area, Grant.
Hey, Ma, I'm sorry. Grant. Ma, fuck out of here. Ma, I'm sorry. Let me just get a hug, Ma. Ma, let me just get a hug, Ma. Hey, Ma, I'm sorry. Fuck off me. Fuck off me. Hey, Ma, I'm sorry. Ma, I'm sorry. Fuck off me, Brett. Hey, Ma.
Context of White Supremacy. Justice, Gus T Renegade, in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of racism, white supremacy. Today's date, Monday, March 24th, 2014. So I have been told. It looks like Google is even taking a moment to do some recognition of non-white people who have used their time and energy to combat racism. They are recognizing the birthday of Miss Dorothy Height. You can check out, they actually did a post in the LA Times, Time Magazine, lots of different places. I think that's a pattern I have observed as well. If you are a black person, really anywhere in the world, if you're doing what you are supposed to do with your life currency, generally you will get some recognition if you're doing something that is even halfway constructive in working against the global system of racism. The audio clip that we heard at the beginning of the broadcast from the 2013 film Fruitvale Station on the murder of Oscar Grant. The scene in the film, they kind of do a flash backward to his time in greater confinement prison. Very tough scene with Mr. Grant and his mother, really touching on some of the issues that we will be talking about today. Our guest for today's broadcast, I believe it was Dr. Tommy Curry. The second time he was on the program, just a few weeks back for folks who heard him last month. He dropped lots of different references, different books and what have you, while we were conversing. And he mentioned during the course of the discussion the book that we're going to be talking about today. I think a lot of folks focus on prison and the number of black people that are in greater confinement. But this particular book, which I thought did make it stand out as significant from a lot of the other texts, focused on how you hear so much, particularly now that President Obama's in the White House, you hear pretty frequently that black people have made so much progress, especially since March on Washington this past summer, and we have come such a long way, and my goodness, this is just incredible and really a testament to the great system of democracy and justice that we have here in this country and the changes that have been made. And our guest for today's broadcast, a lot of her research shows that many of the measurements when people make gauges in terms of the number of black people who have obtained a college degree or whatever other source of education, in terms of the wages that black people earn, types of employment that black people have, many of these statistics are skewed because they are leaving out a sizable portion of black people who are in greater confinement. And once you actually incorporate that population, whatever study that you're making of black people, it tends to greatly retard how much progress black people have made in dealing with racism and the injustices that have been dumped upon us for centuries in this part of the world and elsewhere. Our guest for today's broadcast, she is a professor of sociology at the University of Washington, right here in my neck of the woods. She is a sociologist trained in demographic methods with interests in social inequality. She is a founding member of the Scholars Strategy Network. The book we will be primarily focused on today, Invisible Men, Mass Incarceration, and the Myth of Black Progress, published in 2012. Real pleasure to have her on the program. Joining us live, Dr. Becky Pettit. Dr. Pettit, are you with us?
I am. Thanks for having me, Gus.
Pleasure to have you on the broadcast. For any of our listeners, this might be their first time hearing about your book and the work that you do. Folks can also catch, she did a PBS special, speaking of the March on Washington. She did a segment, The March at 50 Years, where she talked about some of these issues as well. Anything that you think our listeners should know about you before we get started?
No, I think you summed it up. I'm a professor at the University of Washington, and hopefully we're going to have a chance to talk about my book, Invisible Men.
Absolutely. For folks who have not seen you, you are a white woman. Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
Right on. This program, Context of White Supremacy, I have unfortunately concluded what is at the root of a lot of the issues in your book, and as well as a lot of the other problems that are facing black people, non-white people worldwide, is the system of white supremacy racism. When I use the term racism and or the term white supremacy, I use those terms as synonyms, and I use the same definition for both terms. The definition I use is as follows: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you think such a system exists, and do you think that is an accurate definition?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I think we all have ways that we understand the world in which we live. I'm not sure. I mean, I think there certainly are ways of differentiation, and I very much recognize the privilege, certainly in this country and in many other countries, that I, as a white person, have. I guess one of the questions that I have is sort of about the intentionality of the subjugation of others, and that's an issue that I do address in my book, which is that I think there are a lot of people who don't think very consciously about the privilege that they have and the behaviors that they engage in that are associated with those privileges, and how that affects other groups of people.
Fascinating. That is about 2 or 3 different patterns, pretty consistent responses that we get on the program, mostly from white people, but some non-white people as well. Number one, definitions. Anytime anyone, myself, anyone else, I encourage definitions are very important, particularly what people mean when they talk about racism, because it's been my experience that frequently either that word doesn't get defined at all, which in my opinion really erodes the constructive value of the conversation when you really haven't properly defined, articulated the term, and or people have different definitions of the term racism, which is fine, to be expected, but we got to make sure that we all know, okay, I have a different definition of racism than you do, so when I use the term, I don't mean the same thing that you do. I think that's very important. For this broadcast, we are very much into just people speaking honestly. We don't like to do a lot of pussyfooting. Let's just be live and direct. If you don't agree or if you don't think it's accurate, that's fine. With regards to the system or the definition that I gave, I didn't say anything about privilege, and I didn't say anything about intentionality. So if you do not think the definition is accurate, is that what you're saying? You don't think that definition is accurate?
Oh, I don't know that it's not accurate. I mean, I think it's, I think the way, it's the first I heard it, so I'm sort of processing it. But I think that, I guess the way that I interpreted it was that subjugation, in my mind, subjugation sort of implies intentionality, right, when we subjugate others. So I don't deny that that's a way to characterize race relations in the U.S. And other countries, for that matter. I'm just not sure that that's the way that I would characterize it exactly. So I don't question the definition. I don't question the definition. I'm just not sure exactly how to engage with it, I guess.
What definition do you use for the term racism?
Well, that's a tough one. I mean, I think that in the context of the work that I do, I think a lot about, so for those who haven't read Invisible Men, the book is about how it is that we construct social statistics or characterizations of the American population, and how the fundamental observation is that when you hear that the unemployment rate is 6.7% or whatever it is this month, that those data come from surveys of the U.S. population that live in households. Well, by definition, and we've been collecting data the same way since 1939. And at different points in American history, different subgroups of the population are just left out. So you can think about during World War II, active duty military would have been left out. Same thing in the late 60s and early 70s, and periods of military buildup. And the primary observation in the book is that over the last 40 years, there's been this massive growth of the incarcerated population, what you call people living in greater confinement, and people who are living in institutional facilities, prisons, jails, long-term care facilities of any kind, active duty military. Those people are left out of conventional statistics. So we've overstated, and people living in correctional facilities are disproportionately black, disproportionately male, and are disproportionately of low education. They're less likely to complete high school than those who haven't.
We got disconnected from Dr. Pettit. I will see if we can get her back on the line. You might hear a ring in the background. It's, little patience.
Hello.
Yes, we got disconnected.
I'm sorry, I lost you. But so I don't know where exactly I was, but the fundamental observation in the book is that we're missing the most disadvantaged segments of the population when we collect information about the unemployment rate, the high school dropout rate, the wage gap, a whole host of other things. And so we're overstating black progress. That's the claim I make in the book. Now, what does this mean in terms of racism? Now, what I think, why we do that, I don't make strong claims about why we do that, but I do make claims that we haven't collectively acknowledged the different ways in which people live and organize their lives, particularly in relation to households. Now, that's not just about race or ethnicity or social class. It's a much more general issue, in that there has been a failure to acknowledge. And in my world, I think it's really important to think about privilege, and that the people who are making decisions about how it is we collect information live in a very stratified society. People may live in different neighborhoods. Their children go to different schools. They go to different churches, and so there is a very complicit, I'll call it ignorance, and that's long-standing. And so part of the aim of the book is really to draw attention to these very subtle and easily unseen ways in which we reinforce exclusion and difference. And race is a key issue here, particularly because of the racial inequality in the criminal justice system. So in my work, I don't directly engage this idea of racism, but it's sort of the implicit argument is that this is long-standing, it's institutionalized, both through the criminal justice system, but also through the ways in which we collect information at the national level about different subgroups of the population, and how we conveniently exclude some groups and not others. And so it's not a coincidence that I borrow the title from the book from Ralph Ellison, who in the prologue of Invisible Man writes, "I'm invisible simply because people refuse to see me." So in my characterization, that's a very long-winded answer to what I think racism is. But I think it's implicit in the ways in which we categorize and differentiate different subgroups of the population. That and sometimes it's conscious, sometimes it's not conscious. And part of what I'm trying to do in the book is to draw these somewhat subtle but incredibly important distinctions to broader attention.
Okay. There's a white student at the University of Washington. She recently completed her PhD, and one of the ways we would talk about racism, white supremacy, one of the ways that we discussed, where we had agreement that white people practice racism, white supremacy, in my view, deliberately. She would say consciously and or subconsciously. I would say this is done deliberately, frequently, most often, is to not give clear answers to questions and or to use lots and lots of words when they give their response, so that you don't really get a clear answer. My question was, what is your definition of racism? Now, you are a sociologist at the University of Washington. I find it hard to believe that you do not have a clear, concise definition of racism if you're doing this work, which is not just on random subgroups. This work specifically is about black males and the history of black males being incarcerated in this area of the world. I find it very difficult to believe that you do not have a concise definition of racism that you can share with us, because I didn't hear it in what you just shared. You spoke for quite a few minutes, and I did not hear a definition of what you mean when you use the term racism.
Yeah, I don't know that I do have a concise definition of racism.
Okay. That, in my view, what I said before, that is a major problem, in my view, and that's one of the main reasons, in my view, why we have not solved this problem. And it could be that Dr. Pettit is just not being honest about that. That could be happening as well. I don't know. But I would say consistently, this is a major problem, and this all of the folks that are listening to this broadcast, you should be very mindful of that. Anytime you engage in dialogue on racism, make sure you ask the person that you're talking to or people that you're talking to, what do you mean when you say racism? And if they don't have a definition, they can't give it to you, man, red flags should be going up all over the place. And I mean, this is just standard in my view. Hang on one second, because this is hugely important in my view. I would encourage folks to think of any other discipline. Anyone who takes a class or has ever taken a class, you generally have a glossary of terms when you're studying that class. Any major concept that you're talking about, researching, examining, you generally have a definition, even if there are many different definitions for that term. Democracy, that might be what you're studying. There will generally be at least one definition given, and then you can, parse over that as you go. Not having a definition at all for a concept that you're studying, that generally does not happen in any serious discipline of study, in my view. I could be in error. Did you want to respond?
Yeah, because I think in what I was trying to say in the book, what I talk about is what I think of as institutionalized racism. That racism is institutionalized differentiation of groups on the basis of what we call race. Now, race in and of itself is a very contested topic. So I think while I think it's a tricky question, and the context is important in which how you define racism. There's everyday racism, and there's a lot of work on everyday racism. And then in my book, the way that I talk about racism, I never use the term racism in the book.
I noted that. I noted that.
Yeah, and that's intentional, because the book actually, it is. I mean, the book actually isn't specifically about race. It's not. It's about exclusion. And it happens, and I think it's really important. I think this is probably why, I don't know, it's important in this contemporary context that the criminal justice system disproportionately affects people of color. And that is critical for how we understand inequality more broadly, which is what drew me to this subject. So I didn't come to this project because I'm a scholar of race. I came to this project because I'm a scholar of American inequality, and you can't study American inequality without studying race in the criminal justice system. So that's the observation that brought me here. Now, again, that was a very long-winded answer, but fundamentally the way that I think about race in the book is that it's institutionalized differentiation from how we count to who we incarcerate.
I will rewind back, and again, I will say to our listeners, I suspect that these long-winded responses and the lack of a definition for racism, and what she said, the intentional omission of explicitly using the term racism in the book, in my view, I suspect all of that could be a part of the deliberate act of racism, white supremacy on Dr. Pettit's part, because I've just seen this a lot from white people in terms of obfuscating what's happening with regards to non-white people, black people being mistreated in the system of racism. I've seen this too consistently, as well as the assertion that somehow white people are ignorant, that they are just unaware that these things are happening, even if they are a part of the process through what you call institutional racism, even if they are a part of the policymakers or enforcement officers, judges, district attorneys, on and on and on, even if they are a part of that apparatus that produces this mass number of black people who are in greater confinement or wherever they happen to be at in what they call the criminal justice system, that they are somehow unaware of all of this. I think that is malarkey of the highest order. But I could be in error. I was going to ask about something that happened locally in Seattle, but I will not even pull off track to do that at this point. I will stick with the book. You already gave kind of an overview of what your book was about and how you came to this topic. The title of it is one of my favorite books that is explicitly about racism, and this is, again, for listeners, this, in my view, it is a major act of racism. When white people do studies, write books, do films, lectures, and it's on racism. It's obvious. It couldn't be more obvious that it's on racism. I can just read the title of her book again, which is Invisible Men, M-E-N, Invisible Men, The Myth of Mass Incarceration and the Myth of Black Progress. And somehow this is not directly about racism. The term racism doesn't even pop up in this book. Even with the short title, without the subtitle, Invisible Men, it's an homage to Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. You have a quotation from his text in the book. I think anyway, we've talked about that book extensively on this program. It is explicitly, from page 1 to the very end, about racism. No hiding it, no diluting it, no getting around that. Why would you select that book to be the title or the reference point for your work, where you don't even explicitly use the term racism?
So the book started with a puzzle, an empirical puzzle. A colleague of mine and I, his name is Brian Sykes. He's a professor at DePaul University, and he's been a longtime collaborator of mine. And he and I were trying to estimate what fraction of different socio-demographic groups had been to prison for at least a year. So what fraction of white men with a college degree, what fraction of white men with a high school diploma, what fraction of white men who dropped out of high school, what fraction of black men with a college degree, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what we found was that we found more young black men who've dropped out of high school, who didn't finish high school, had been to prison for at least a year than were alive. So we found, and so that was the puzzle that motivated the book, which was, why is it that we're observing these men in prison? And this is just in state or federal prison where they stay for at least a year. These aren't jail spells. So why is it that, how is it possible that we could observe men in prison or jail and not observe them in census data when we collect census data every 10 years? So how is it that we can find them in one source and not in the other? And that was the motivation of the book, which is, where are they? They're invisible, and they're invisible simply because we don't want to see them. It's not convenient. It's not convenient to account for the most disadvantaged segments of the population. And that's true among young black men who've dropped out of high school. It's true of people who are unstably housed or homeless. It's true of children in the foster care system. So that's where the title Invisible Man came from, or Invisible Men. Sorry, where Invisible Men came from. And that was the motivation of the book, and that was what we had, these questions, and we continued to investigate them.
Just for our listening audience, Mr. Ellison, he was not referencing just black inmates. I'm not saying that you're saying this, but I just think it's important that he was not just referencing black inmates. He was referencing black people in total. It didn't matter what level of education you had, what your status was, what your job was, that white people just do not see you as a human being. You are something else, something lower than a human being, unless I misread the text. But we've talked about that quite a few times with different folks. And one thing I would say as well, I don't even think it's that these folks are not seen, because the Corrections Corporation of America, they certainly see them. They certainly make sure they have an accurate count on the number of folks that are being warehoused, greater confinement, prison. I think it is, they are not seen in a way that is, oh, these are human beings. Maybe we should make sure that we're adjusting policy correctly so that we can do something to improve their quality of life, so that they're not just hanging out here and never doing anything productive, never contributing, never being able to go back and have a rewarding life with their family. Some of the dilemmas that Oscar Grant was shown to have in Fruitvale Station that people talked so much about last summer. They are seen simply as it relates to how much money are we going to get for this bed? How much are we going to get for this? I think that's the way that they're seen. Just number, specifically a number attached with a dollar sign on how much they are worth as an inmate, unless I'm mistaken.
Well, so that's the irony in the book, Gus. I think that or why I wrote the book the way that I did was because we do count them. We count them extremely well. We count them multiple times a day.
Uh-oh. Dr. Pettit got dropped again. This might be on her end because I'm not getting dropped from the program line. Lost you again?
Yes.
We got cut out. You said we count them multiple times a day.
Yeah, so that's the irony. We count inmates and people who are in greater confinement multiple times a day. People who are in federal, state, local facilities, people who are on probation or parole. We count them. We electronically monitor them. We video monitor them. We know a lot about them. And so that's the irony, which is that, but we don't count them when we think about political apportionment, or we don't count them where they come from. We don't count them when we think about education funding. We don't count them when we think about unemployment spending. When we turn around and think about social policy and the kinds of things that we can do to, or the reasons we have certain social policies, that we don't actually collect the information about people who may need services of different kinds, and some people may not need services. But that's an irony. There's an irony there, which is we know a lot about them exactly because for the reasons that you say, which is that there are private correctional facilities and others that get reimbursed per person, per day. And yet for other reasons, we don't count, especially people who are incarcerated.
Absolutely. She does make that point. Dr. Pettit does make that point in the book, which I thought was valid. I want to get back to the book because I have several important questions I want to get to. But before I do that, I tend to ask a lot of the white people who come on our program this question. Has any non-white person ever accused you of doing something racist or being racist? Has that ever happened? And if so, can you recount details?
Being racist. Well, I mean, I think that there are quite a lot of people who ask me why I wrote this book. I think that, and I have gotten, there have been a couple of interesting responses in public settings where, so I want to I've given a lot of talks on the book. I've been on a lot of radio shows, and I was afraid when I wrote the book and I had the title. I thought, I'm not sure that black people are going to like this title or going to like this book, right? Because the title of the book is The Myth of Black Progress. There has been a lot of black progress. There are a lot of successful black people. And I was really worried that that was gonna be very offensive to people. The surprising thing, one of the surprising things to me, and maybe it's not so surprising, but one thing that has been interesting to me is that when I give talks, almost to a person, black people get it. And because they get the criminal justice system, because my friends who are black, who are professors, have cousins or brothers or sons who've been incarcerated or picked up or policed in some way. And so across the board, when I give talks, I often see, and I've had people say to me, we know this, nod, nod, in the audience. It turns out, and this is where white people, whether it's ignorance or convenience, there are a lot of white people who just don't get the criminal justice system because they're not exposed to it in the same way. They don't get picked up. They don't get stopped while driving. They don't have a son or a cousin or a brother or a nephew or a loved one who's been incarcerated. And so there's a big difference by race in how people understand the criminal justice system, meaning how they experience it and who they know who's involved in it. And
I want to hop in because we're diverting a little bit because this wasn't really about how white people perceive your book. The question was, do any black people, have any non-white people ever suspected you of being racist?
Yes, so that gets to this answer. I'm long-winded. Maybe it's because I'm white. Maybe it's because I'm a professor. I don't know. So I've had a couple of instances where I've given talks on the book in which a person of color, I don't know what they self-identify as by race, has said to me, what are you talking about? You're a white woman. How do you know? And very explicitly, very publicly questioning my credibility and authority on these issues, and why don't I study successful black people? That's been a question that has been articulated to me, which is why don't I study successful black people?
Have there been any instances not related to the book, just in your time on the planet, where a non-white person, black person, suspected you of doing something racist, being racist?
Oh, I suspect that's probably happened, but I can't tell you. I mean, I don't know anybody who's come to me and said that explicitly. I can't think of any.
Okay, that's interesting. When people, black people specifically, when they get this information, you said a lot of them, they're nodding, they give a sense that they already understand a lot of the information that you put forward in the book. When they say, oh, okay, Dr. Pettit is a white woman, why would a white woman be writing this type of book? What is your response?
Because I did not intend to study race. That was not an area of particular inquiry for me. That was not what I've studied. I studied labor and inequality. My first book is on gender inequality in the workplace, and I made a similar observation, which is that women who stay home and take care of children aren't counted in lots of different kinds of statistics. And it's convenient. And they're disadvantaged in lots of ways. It's a different issue, but a similar argument. And so I'm really interested in how we do social science in ways that privilege different groups of people and different ways of relating to society. Right? So you get counted if you work in the paid labor force. You don't get counted if you don't. That means we value work in the paid labor force differently than we value work at home. You get counted if you live in a household. You don't get counted if you live in a prison. It means that we value people who live in households more than we value people who live in prisons. And so fundamentally, I study inequality and how we understand it. And so that's how I came to the book.
Context of White Supremacy, University of Washington professor Dr. Becky Pettit. You're going to have to get some serious pushback on this one because I tell folks all the time, in my opinion, it is one of the greatest mythologies in the world. And I mean that in the world. We have had people on this program on consecutive days where we had one guest in South Africa, and then the next day we had a guest in North Carolina, and they both asserted with great confidence that white people are ignorant and that is what is producing their racist behavior. In my opinion, Nothing could be further from the truth. It is the equivalent of standing up before the world and saying that 1 + 5 is 17. It's not just a little bit wrong, it's way wrong. I would say we could just rewind 50 years. We don't have to go back to ancient history. We could just rewind 50 years. Let's say it's 1964. There is no way you could be standing here in Seattle or in South Africa and say, white people don't know about racism. They don't understand this. There is absolutely no way. You would be looked at as though you're crazy if you even attempted to make such an argument. You still have signs up, not just here, but in South Africa in 1964, saying whites only. No niggers can use this water fountain. No niggers can use this bathroom. Or in South Africa, no Kafirs can use this facility. You still had signs up at that point. How did the signs get up? Who put the signs up? Are you saying that white people can't read these signs? They don't know what these signs mean? Is that what you're saying? That they don't understand racism? So in my view, this is a very new argument, unless I'm misinformed, that white people are somehow ignorant about racism and that is what is either producing or a major factor in this problem that we're trying to solve. For this specific case, your book, with regards to the prison system, and you just said that a lot of white people, they don't get it, end quote. They don't get your book. They don't get what you're talking about with the prison system. That's another one. I just think that is highly inaccurate. It is bunkum of the highest level. And I would say that because this is not new. People have been writing and talking about racism in the prison industrial complex for a long time. This comes up in Invisible Man, the police brutalizing black people and tossing black people in jail when they really haven't done anything. That book came out in 1952. That's longer than 50 years ago, more than 60 years ago. The Black Panther Party, that was on their 10-point program. I know many, many, many white people who are professors, scholars, some of them, they're just lay folks, and they know about the Black Panther Party. They know about their 10-point program. Angela Davis, most of the white women that I know who classify themselves as feminists or who have done some women's studies, they know about Angela Davis. They love Angela Davis. She's written about this extensively. Every white person I know seems to be chomping at the bit, to quote Michelle Alexander in The New Jim Crow. I do not believe that white people are ignorant or misinformed or unaware about the prison system and locking up large numbers of black people. I mean, we could just keep hitting Douglas Blackman, slavery by another name. It's tons of these, and they're not just from a present day standpoint. You're getting a historical understanding of how this all came to be. I can't even count the number of books that are on this subject matter. Most of the time, I don't even have an interest in reading them, because they're just saying the same thing over and over and over and over and over, and it's not getting to solving this problem. So I would really like to know, how is it that you conclude that these white people, I guess significant numbers of them, they are just ignorant. They don't understand the legal system, the prison system, and the racism that is endemic in that structure.
It's a good question. I think there's a couple of things. I think that the media fuels misinformation about the criminal justice system. Most people have woefully inaccurate perceptions of crime and their own risk of victimization, and that's the women, and white women have the worst. That they think they're likely to be victimized when in fact they're not likely to be victimized or very unlikely to be victimized, people they think the crime rate has gone up when in fact the crime rate has gone down, and crime is at the same rate for most measures as it was in the late 1960s. So I think, but yet those misperceptions are fueled by attention in the media to very rare, violent crimes, and when in fact we know that people are most likely to be victimized by their intimates, and that people most at risk of being violently hurt or murdered are people of color. So I think that's an important reason for the sort of, I don't know if I would call it ignorance or misperception or what it is. That's a key issue. I think another key issue is that we live in a very highly stratified society, and that victimization and exposure to the criminal justice system is concentrated in certain communities, geographically, demographically, socially, economically, so that there are subgroups of the population that there are people who don't know anybody who's ever been incarcerated. They don't know anybody who's ever been arrested, right? And there are other groups of the population. I have a colleague here at the University of Washington. Her name is Hetty Lee. She's been doing work with another colleague trying to figure out how many people, how many black women, right? Because we often talk about black men being exposed to the criminal justice system. What about black women? And she's a black woman, and she's interested in these questions. How many black women know somebody or have a family member who's incarcerated today? She estimates it's about 44%. 44% of black women across the economic spectrum have a family member incarcerated. That's phenomenal, right? I mean, in a bad way, I think. It's huge. That's a huge proportion. And that women know have up to 8 family members or very close intimates who are incarcerated. So that's really different than for white women, where the numbers are much, much lower. I don't know them offhand. So there is a difference in exposure, and I think that's really important. But I think the key thing for me in my book, it's not so much people don't know about the criminal justice system, but they think I don't know but research suggests that people think there's sort of this just relationship. People commit crimes, they go to prison or jail. They don't think about how it is the criminal justice system over the last 40 years has been a public policy initiative that disproportionately affects people of color and those with very low levels of education. So we're disproportionately policing, prosecuting, and sentencing people for nonviolent drug and property crimes. And the thing that people don't often appreciate is that young black people are less likely to use drugs than are young white people, but they're more likely to get caught. So I think whether it's convenient, whether it's ignorant, whether it's the people just don't want to talk about it, there's a number of factors that go into why it is we're still where we are. I think with that in mind, all those things in mind, I have seen the conversation change dramatically in the last 5 years for a couple of reasons, very instrumental reasons. One, states are very concerned about finances, and so they're trying to figure out whether or not incarceration is the right way to go or the criminal justice system is a good investment. Even states we don't think of as very progressive, like Texas. Two, I think that, Michelle Alexander's book has made a lot of people read it, and they want to talk about it. I think it's been really important. And then the third thing is I think there's been important legal challenges in places like the state of California where, and the state of New York, and the city of Seattle, in fact, where, there are moves afoot from organizations like the ACLU and others to advocate on behalf of inmates or potential inmates, people who are caught up in the criminal justice system, to try and make it a little more just. And I think all those things have contributed to changes in the conversation somewhat.
I will give my response, and I'll repeat what I said, because I've never, and that would include today's guest, Dr. Pettit, as well. I have never heard a white person give a logical explanation with regards to white people being ignorant in this context, or in general when they say that the problem is that white people don't think about racism, they don't think about these issues, they don't think about themselves as being white, or all that other stuff. I've never heard a logical, reasonable, sensible response, and that would include today. Pretty much most of the things that you said, I would say they support my view that white people are not ignorant. And I'll just kind of walk through some of them. You started off saying that white people, that they, particularly white women, that they get all this misinformation from the media, that they're likely to be a victim of a crime, and there's all this danger out there, and we need, really punitive justice system to get these criminals off the street. In my view, that to me shows their understanding of what a quote-unquote criminal is, because when they talk about this, they're generally, disproportionately talking about black people, non-white people, especially black people. That's who they're talking about. And there are many, many illustrations of this, what you just said with the enforcement of the drug laws. If we want to talk about Willie Horton, George Bush winning office, Ian Honey Lopez just had his book come out talking about that. And when they talk about getting tough on crime, I think they have that great quote from the Nixon era where they talk about you can go out and say tough on crime, and that is code for going after black people. Just that, in my view, it shows white people's understanding, their connection. Crime is black people. Crime is black people. And at that time, it wasn't even Latinos or whoever else. It was black people specifically. That right there, in my opinion, shows this is not ignorance. This is just the way that we think about whom should be in prison. It's black people. And really, we can go back to Douglas Blackman documentary or the book, which shows that that was kind of the foundation of the prison system in this area. And we've had quite a few authors on the program who've talked about that. I'm remembering Police in the Black Community, which makes the same assessment that the foundation of the police system that we have in this area of the world is slavery. I'm thinking of right here in Seattle, Norm Stamper, Breaking Rank. He says that enforcement officers, he was former chief of police in Seattle, and he was an enforcement officer in California, where he says that white people are afraid of black males, and that, again, they're criminals, they're dangerous, they are the ones that are supposed to be in prison. That's what we put these institutions here for. That's also articulated in Texas Tough, since you mentioned Texas. Robert Perkins' book, he's been a guest on the program, the foundation of a lot of the policing practices and prison systems that we have right there, and specifically to nab black people. So that would be one. I would cite an example from your campus, since I'm in your neck of the woods. I had a conversation with a UW police officer, and he said, I get calls all the time. He said, you would not believe how many calls I get on a regular daily basis where someone calls me, most likely a white person, but it's over the phone, calls and says, hey, this black guy is out on the corner, they're standing around, and you need to go get them. And he says, well, what is the person doing? Are they, committing a crime? Are they doing, what are they doing? He said, well, they're just standing there. You need to go get them. And he says, well, I can't go do anything with this person if they're just standing there. If you haven't observed them committing a crime or doing something suspicious, just standing is not reason, is not justification for me to go and talk to this person or, do something to them. And he says this happens all the time. Again, in my opinion, that is not ignorance. That is just the way that white people think about black people. They are criminals. They are supposed to warrant police attention. They are supposed to be in prison. With the argument that white people don't have any exposure either to black people or criminals or to the criminal justice system, in my opinion, none of that is required. You don't have to have any exposure to black people. You don't have to have ever gone to a prison. All you have to understand is how you are supposed to think about black people. And I have seen no evidence that white people miss that. In Locke, collectively, white people understand we are supposed to think of black people as criminals. They are supposed to be in jail. Exactly what you just said. There is no thought that, oh my gosh, something unjust happened with Marissa Alexander. She's not supposed to be there. No, she's supposed to be there. That's what's supposed to happen. The response to Trayvon Martin, he was likely a thug and a criminal. Oh well. Better off that he is gone. That was a lot of the response that you got to that. That is typical. That is, in my view, to be expected, and it's not ignorance. That's just the way that white people think about black people under racism, white supremacy. It's nothing, in my view, it's totally incorrect to reference that as ignorance. In my view, it is accurate to reference that as racist logic, racist think, and that produces what you talk about in your book, in my view. The last example that I would point to in terms of this not being a problem of ignorance. It just shows white people's understanding of how the system of racism, white supremacy works, how white people are supposed to think of black people, and really how everyone, not just white people, is supposed to think of black people. They are dangerous and they should be caged. I have heard it's almost cliche when they talk about shoplifting. When they say that some young white people, and this I think is important because a lot of times racism gets talked about, some of the few times that they will say, oh yeah, there are some racist white people, it gets couched in the rubric of these are old, crotchety geriatrics who are about to die, and as soon as they're out of here, racism won't be a problem anymore. And I feel like that is total malarkey as well. Young white people, under 20 white people, when they want to shoplift, I've heard this all the time. You can tell me if I'm making this up, where they will say, well, we'll just get a black person to go in too, and all the attention will be focused on the black person as the shoplifter, and then I can run around and loot the store and nobody will be paying attention to me. That is standard. It's almost cliche, and in my view, that further evidences it's not ignorance. I understand how this system works. I understand so much, I can use it to my advantage to commit criminal activity because I know we think criminal black person, criminal black person. That's what's conveyed. That's the way we are supposed to think about black people. And I see no evidence that that is going to change anytime soon, even with a lot of the rhetoric that you're talking about these current concerns. Really, if anything, the concerns that I see are not, oh man, this is really racist. Look at all the disproportionate sentencing against black people and how disproportionate the drug laws have been and all that. Man, this is really unjust and racist. We need to do something about that. If anything, it's been, oh man, we are running out of money. I don't think we have enough money to keep cramming prisons like this. This is really ruining our budget. We got to find something else to do that is more economically expedient, not our concern for black people, unless I have been misinformed. Do you want to respond? And if I'm saying anything, if I'm saying that's inaccurate or if it's not making sense, definitely let me know, because I, am not perfect and I'm not an expert on racism. But if you want to respond, if I said anything that's inaccurate or illogical, let me know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think as someone recently told me, we all have our truth, right? So we all have our ways of understanding the world, and so I don't challenge any of those. I think that I share your I have a lot of cynicism about current conversations about the criminal justice system. I don't think that there's been a moral awakening. I don't think that there's been a change in the way people think about race in the criminal justice system. I think that people, from where I sit, I think that people, administrators, and the public are thinking a lot about how much stuff costs, and that when the state of California was in a budget crunch and they were legally mandated to decarcerate, I think they did it they're doing it in a somewhat cynical way, but it has shifted the conversation, and I think states like Texas, New York, and others, they're thinking hard about alternatives to custodial sentences because custodial sentences are expensive. Do I think that there's been this radical change in the way people think about people who are incarcerated? No. But I want to say one thing, though, with respect to misunderstandings or misperceptions. Based on my experience and talking to a lot of different people, I think people are surprised, and whether they're genuinely surprised or they just feign surprise, I don't know. I think people are surprised when they learn that black kids use drugs less than white kids, because they think black kids are criminals, right? It's not that they're any more criminal than white kids, it's just that they get caught, right? So in that way, their perceptions are actually, they're their perceptions, but they're wrong. Actually, they're empirically wrong. And that's where it's important to have these things like the stop and frisk case in New York City. That's important because the evidence very clearly showed racial disproportionality, something that people who study this know, but the public and lots of other people have these perceptions. They're just not true. So that's part of what I'm trying to do in my book is to bring empirical evidence, to bring data, to bear to some of these perceptions about the way we think the world works, or the way we think certain groups have done over time. And this isn't just, people who get their information from newspapers. I mean, academics, people who study the labor market, they say, wow, I've never thought of that before. What does it mean that we only get our data from people who live in households? Well, it means we're missing people who don't live in households, who doesn't live in households. And when they stop to think about it, it makes sense that we're missing the most disadvantaged segments of the population, who move a lot, who live in institutions, who are unstably housed or homeless, who are in foster care. I mean, those are the people we're missing. But even academics who study this stuff all the time, when they stop to think about it, they understand it. So maybe that's the problem. Maybe it's that people aren't stopping to think about it long enough because it doesn't affect them.
I reject that, and I've said this before on the program. I strongly reject the notion or the idea that people have their truths, quote unquote, and I hear that a lot in the Pacific Northwest and on the West Coast. 1 + 1 is 2. That is not my truth. That is logic. That would be accurate whether we were in South Africa, whether we were in Israel, Japan, or downtown Seattle. 1 and 1 is 2. And that's the way that I think we should be looking at racism, white supremacy, not from quote unquote our truth, but is this accurate? And as I said, in my view, it is obvious. It is not accurate that white people don't think about this, or they're misinformed, or they're ignorant. I just see way too many examples in this particular context that white people don't know. The prison system is supposed to be stuffed with black people. In fact, if I had to give one more reference just for the global implications of this, I was in Hawaii, and Hawaii has lots of international tourists. There was a person that I thought was white. I didn't ask him, but I think he's a white person from Brazil. Now, we had just came from a party, and there was a police officer riding behind us. Now, he thought he was going to be pulling him over. It was late at night. It was after 1 o'clock. It turns out he was not. He was going wherever he was going. And this white guy from Brazil says, if he had stopped me, I would have just looked at him and said, hey, and pointed at me. And he says, hey, he's a black guy. You should be focused on him. Now, I was a lot more confused about racism at the time, but this guy's from Brazil, and he has the same understanding of black people. Police are supposed to be focused on you as the criminal, potential looter, rapist, drug dealer, drug user, all of the above, whatever. They're supposed to be focused on you, not me, a white person, anywhere in the world. And just my reminder for listeners, stop and frisk in name. It doesn't just happen in New York. They had the exact same thing in London. Doreen Lawrence's son, who was not killed by racist white thugs, has a suit filed against the Metropolitan Police in London because he's been stopped over 25 times, no reason, no justification. Same thing that they do here, just for the global ramifications. And I would say that as well. How does this end up being all over the world that black people are stopped and frisked and abused by police officers? And this is happening because white people all over the world are ignorant and don't know about this. That, again, I will just say it is malarkey of the highest order. And it's been my experience that white people, they tend, not all, but many of the white people that I come in contact with, they have read Douglas Blackman's book. They have read Michelle Alexander's book. They have read Angela Davis's book. If not all, they have read at least one of them, or Invisible Man, or Native Son, Richard Wright, because this is not a new problem in terms of black people being incarcerated. White people are not ignorant about this issue. That is just, at any rate, we had people that called in who have questions. If you would like to ask Dr. Pettit a question, and or if I have been talking crazy, feel free, let me know. Gus, you're not making sense. The things that you're saying are not accurate. Definitely will take that as well. The person who dialed in at 8423, did you have a question for Dr. Becky Pettit? Your line should be open.
Hi, good afternoon, Gus, and to the guest, Dr. Pettit. I want to make one quick comment of something I just heard Dr. Pettit say. I wanted to disagree with a little bit. She said that the reason why there are more black people incarcerated is because black youth, because they get caught more often. And I think that's not the reason. The reason is because they're targeted by law enforcement by either written or unwritten policy. So that's kind of a misspeak, I guess. But I had two quick questions I wanted to ask Dr. Pettit. My first question is, how difficult was it to do a study on the prison industrial complex in America and at the same time avoid the topic of race and racism and avoid having a working definition of the term racism?
Mm-hmm.
That's the first question.
So, okay. Do you want me to answer that, or do you want to go ahead and ask the second one, and then I'll answer both?
No. Go ahead and tackle that one first.
Okay. So I just want to say you're absolutely right in the targeting. In terms of black youth are more likely to get caught because they're more likely to be policed. They're more likely to be targeted. So they're more likely to be policed and then prosecuted and then sentenced differently than whites. So that's right. I agree with what you said. In terms of, was it difficult to study this and avoid the topic of race or racism? I don't avoid the topic of race. I talk about race. I don't talk about racism. And that has been a criticism of the book, where I don't talk a lot about why. Why is it we do what we do? And part of that was because it's not really, it's not the kind of work I do, and wasn't really the argument I wanted to make. That argument's been made by lots of other people in terms of, how is it that the criminal justice system has changed over time? Why is it that we're more punitive now than we were 40 years ago? Why do those punitive measures disproportionately affect people of color, young black men in particular? Other people have studied that, and I really try and refer people to that work. As far as what I'm trying to do, part of the reason I wrote the book the way I did, and in some ways don't engage deeply in issues about racism, and I don't use the word racism at all, is because I wanted to make a general argument that I wanted to appeal to a general audience, which is, look, we collect data about the U.S. population because we're constitutionally mandated to do so. Every 10 years we do a decennial census. We did the first one in 1790. We didn't count everybody the same then either, and that's important. But we've done this every 10 years, and we do it. The only constitutional reason why we collect decennial census data is for congressional apportionment. But we also collect data for lots of different reasons, including social policy, including social science research, all sorts of stuff, including education funding, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the argument I really wanted to make was I wanted it to appeal to a really broad audience to say, look, some people are excluded just by design. This could be you. Now, a lot of people think they're never going to end up in the criminal justice system, and so they don't think that could be the reason they're excluded. But there are other reasons they could be excluded. And so that was part of the reason I tried to make it as broad as possible and not necessarily talk specifically about racism.
Okay. My second to last question is, have you ever been in a sexual relationship with a non-white male or female? I'll hang up and listen to the response. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think that's a relevant question, actually. I'm not going to answer that.
Right on. Person who dialed in 9325. Mr. Demery 4. Mr. Demery 4, your line is open. I will make sure I get in for the record. I definitely think that question is relevant. Anytime discussion of racism, white supremacy is being had, I think that question is always relevant. But Mr. Demery 4, your line is open.
Yes. Greetings, Gus. Greetings, Dr. Pettit.
Hello.
I'd like to make a comment and then ask a question. But if I say anything that's incorrect about you, then you can, correct me. But you are a professor at the University of Washington. You wrote a book, Invisible Men. Mass Incarceration, the Myth of Black Progress. You received a grant from the Russell Sage Foundation. You have a colleague, Brian Skites, and you guys did a New York Times article on how prisoners make us look good. And in so doing that, I guess you guys found out that between 1975 and 1979, that there were more young black, low-skilled, in your words, men that had been in prison than were alive, which, brought you to a conclusion that there had to be something wrong. So you started looking into that. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I did some research on you're familiar with Dr. Orlando Patterson's book,
Yes.
Slavery and Social Death? Okay, and Dr. Russell Rumsberger's book, Dropping Out, Why Students Drop Out of High School and What Can Be Done About It? Okay. My first question is, did you receive a grant from the Russell Sage Foundation?
For this book?
Yes.
So the Russell Sage Foundation supported some of my other work. We actually didn't receive any grant money for this book. This book, I had, neither Brian nor I had any financial support from any external institution. Brian was a postdoc here at the University of Washington when we were working on it. And then he moved on to DePaul University. And I was on the faculty at the University of Washington, worked on it when I wasn't teaching and during the summer. So, no, I have received grant money from the Russell Sage Foundation, but that was not for this book.
All right, thank you. I know that the Sage Foundation is for the improvement of social and living conditions in the United States. So my second question would be that how did your research and your book, how was it used to accomplish those goals, to improve the social and living conditions in the United States? Do you know of any?
Yeah, so I think the book fits with the Russell Sage mission because they're very interested in a number of things. One of the programs that they've been really interested in a question called the future of work. And at the very beginning, when I first started doing work on this project, about 15 years ago, and I was working primarily with a colleague who's now at Harvard University. His name is Bruce Western. And he wrote a book I think it's called Prison Inequality. But Bruce and I were really interested in how there's been a lot of attention to racial inequality in the criminal justice system. We know that blacks are between 6 and 8 times more likely to be incarcerated than are whites. So one of the things we were really interested in was how was exposure to the criminal justice system, how did it vary in relation to social class, particularly in relation to education, and employment, and in relation to employment. And so, because one of the arguments that we were really interested in was how it is that shifts in the economy that have affected people with low levels of education, deindustrialization and globalization, how is it that those shifts in the economy may be linked to the growing criminal justice system, and so that was why I think the Russell Sage Foundation has historically been. They would be able to answer this question, but that's what I think. They were interested in this because they were interested in people who are incarcerated as, in some ways, a reserve labor pool, that they're not employed in the paid workforce. They may be working while they're incarcerated. But the work sort of spun out to other a range of other issues. The Russell Sage Foundation has historically also been very interested in census questions about how it is we do social science. So in some ways, my book fit their mission on a couple of different dimensions. Now, has my book changed the living conditions for anyone? I don't think so, but I think the goal is that it's an opportunity to educate people about a general issue, whether they've been paying attention to it or not in the past.
Okay, thank you. I'll just conclude with my closing statement that I've come to a conclusion that your book and books like Dr. Rumsberger serve as a sort of gauge to measure how well the system of white supremacy is working. And I'll just mute my line after that. Thanks for taking my call, Gus.
Yes, sir, Mr. Demerford. Appreciate the questions. I will tell folks not to dally, hang out to the last minute. If you have a question for Dr. Pettit, you should dial in 760-569-7676, and the code is 564-943#. Press *6 if you have a question. I will also point out in Dr. Pettit's response, she said that there's been a lot of attention to what are called racial disparities in the prison industrial complex, the correctional facilities, and what have you. In my opinion, that would further bolster what I'm saying, that white people are not ignorant. If there are a lot of books or articles or studies, reports being done, at the end of the day, you need funding. The people who have to authorize these publications, I would expect it would be a lot of white people who would be involved in that process. And likely it would be a lot of white people who would be reading this material once it does come out. So I would just say that further bolsters what I'm saying, that is malarkey of the highest order, that white people are poorly informed or ignorant about the system of racism, white supremacy within the context of the prison system in this area of the world. And I would say this applies for any spot on the globe, because this tends to be a problem wherever there are black people, that they are disproportionately locked up, arrested, confined, etc. You have a passage in your book I thought was interesting for many reasons. I'll read it and then I'll get my question. This is on page This is on page 40, well, bottom of 48 and then top of 49. You write, this is not the first time research methods have not kept pace with changing American lifestyles. For example, although cohabitation prior to or in lieu of marriage has been common in the United States for decades, we have only recently begun collecting data in a systemic way that allows researchers and policymakers to develop a detailed understanding of the lived experience of unmarried cohabitators. Similarly, while many Americans identify as mixed race individuals continue to be asked to choose only one race category on most federally administered surveys. The census itself is an exception since 2000, when it allowed individuals to choose more than one race. This passage kind of comes in the context of saying that it's not just with regards to people who collect data or institutes that go around and do surveys and what have you, and they are missing a large population of black people that are incarcerated, that it's not just these folks who have data collection methods that are inaccurate or skewed so that they're not getting the best results. And you give some of these examples. I wanted to know specifically with the latter example about how individuals are asked to choose one race. And I wanted to know, number one, what is the purpose of belonging to a race?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, it depends on why you're asking. I mean, it depends on why you're asking.
I'm asking because you mentioned the concept in your report and about potential problems with regards to racial identification. So I would like to know, what is the purpose of belonging to a race?
so from a measurement perspective versus if for people who belong to a race, right? So I can't answer that question for another person and why it is it's important for them to.
No. You're all of my questions are always your view, not somebody else's view. In your view, so what is the purpose of belonging to a race?
So this is my so for me, what my racial identification is, or as a scholar, what I think the racial identification. I guess I'm not understanding the question, and I'm not trying to be difficult. I think that the point that I was making in the book is that I was trying to make a general claim, or a more general claim, about where there are ambiguities and how those ambiguities privilege existing status hierarchies. I don't know that I ever used that language, but so we didn't collect information about cohabitors because we said, oh, it's a relatively small group, and oh, it just so happens that they may be gay, right? Because at that time, or up until very recently, we didn't have legalized gay marriage. Okay. And so we didn't want to acknowledge that. I don't say all this in the book, but that's the subtext.
Okay.
And the link.
The significance I wanted to get with, because I talk all the time about it's important, other examples that people bring up, different illustrations or metaphors, and these are the two illustrations that you used with regards to other examples of statistics maybe not being gathered in the most efficient, accurate manner. And since you mentioned racial classification, and that's one that I think is very important, what is the value, if I need to rephrase the question, what is the value, what is the importance of belonging to a race, a racial classification? What purpose does that serve?
In many ways, the racial, for these purposes, for the purposes related to the book, the racial classification is an important way of politically identifying, in the sense of as a potentially socially mobilized group to advocate for a racial group or the interests of a racial group. That's one potential reason. That's one. I think that's the context in which the context in which I talked about that, which, there are changing definitions of who people are and how they identify, but race may be particularly salient in the context of collecting data for political mobilization, because you can say, this is how big the group is that I'm advocating on behalf of, or it may be, but there are other reasons it may be important, shared experiences, lived experiences. There are lots of reasons why it may be important for individuals or groups of people. But for the purposes of a data collection, it's really about who can advocate and for how many people. And we often trivialize issues because the group is so small. And I think one of the important issues in my work is that, and when I've done a lot of this stuff in the past, people say, oh, incarceration, that only affects 1 in 100. 1 in 100 adults is incarcerated. And 1 in 33 if you think about everybody who's supervised in the criminal justice system. 1 in 100 adults, that's not many. But the problem is it's not 1 in 100 in every group, right? It's 1 in 3 black men can expect to go to prison. Right. Among black men who've dropped out of high school, it's 60% can expect to go to prison. That's not prison or jail, that's prison for at least a year. So that's not 1 in 100. So the real reason it matters, and the reason these classifications matter, is because in certain groups, this is a normative life event. And so that means that you can make really different claims politically, economically, and socially than you could without that information.
What does, I'll ask a different question then, what is one required to do as a member of a race?
I think that's entirely up to one.
I can ask from your perspective, you said that you're a white person. Are you required to do anything as a member of the white race?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think that I, as a member of the, I don't know. That's a tough question. Am I required to do things? Yes, of course I'm required to do things. And I think that, but I compartmentalize. I compartmentalize my life to the extent that I can. I recognize that I'm very privileged, and that back to one of the early questions you asked me if I've ever been confronted, or I don't know exactly how you phrased it, but it was a question about if I ever been accused of racism. And I was involved in a event a year ago or so, and there was a gentleman who was black, who was a former felon, who had been very, very successful. He had made a very successful business after he was incarcerated, and he was very upset with some of the language that I used in my book. And so he was upset with me, and I said, I can make the argument I can make exactly because I'm privileged, because I can get invited to places and do things, and maybe it's because I'm white, I don't know, but because I can say things and I'm not saying, it's not as confronting to people as it may be if I were black. My collaborator in much of this work is black, and he gets a very different response to his work, to talking about our work, than I do. So, I mean, I don't know for sure, but just in comparing notes in how we present work and how we are reacted to, I think that I have responsibilities as a white person, but also as an academic who does this kind of research, to do everything I can to make it accessible to people so that they can do something with it, or that they have the knowledge at least, and to move forward. I can't decide what everyone else needs to do, but I do think it's important that we understand how it is we collect the data we do, who gets left out, and what implications that has. I can certainly make recommendations for how we can do it better and to be more inclusive, but it's not my decision to make to do that.
I think that was another one where you pivoted away from the question. This is an important one. I really would appreciate this one if you could be honest, specific, right and exact. Like if you could think of two things that you are required to do as a white woman, a member of the white race, things you are specifically required to do as a member of the white race that no one else is required to who does not belong to the white race.
So I don't know how to answer that question because I don't know what the obligations that other people have who belong to different races. Right? I mean, is that a prescription that's coming to me from someone else, or is it something that I feel like I need to do as a member of the white race? So that I don't know how to answer that question actually, and maybe I'm not. I don't know how to answer that question.
I suspect this could be a moment. Strongly suspect this is a moment where you are not being honest with us, because when I asked the question and I said the exact same thing, what are you required to do as a member of the white race? You said, of course, This is being recorded, so people, feel free to check Gus if my memory is off. I am a victim of racism, so, my mind doesn't work as well as it would. But she said pretty quickly, there wasn't a lot of hemming and hawing. You said pretty quickly, of course, there are things, that I do as a member of the white race. And then you went into your dialogue about you giving your talk and how people respond to you, and have you ever been accused of being racist and this blackmail and everything, but you said, of course. So I was waiting on, okay, maybe she's going to give us one or two things, something that you are supposed to do as a member of the white race. And now you're saying that you can't do that. I have other questions that I want to ask, but that just, in my opinion, that's a pretty major act of racism, white supremacy, I suspect, and that's conscious and deliberate, because you said at first, yes, of course, and now you can't answer the question. And I feel like that kind of gets to the core, because I feel like white people are always, or I won't say always, but many white people, they have no problem. There's no hesitation to speak about all of the privileges and goodies that they get as a white person in a system of racism. No problem. They will rattle that off. I can get Band-Aids that match my color. The police don't stop and harass me. Nobody follows me around the store. People don't assume that I got into school for affirmative action. Blah, 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 blah. They can talk all day long. But when it gets to, well, what things do you specifically do? How do you actively participate as a white person in the system of white supremacy? Then lockjaw sets in. The crickets come and nobody has anything to say. And I feel like that it's so consistent.
Wait, Gus, I want to jump in. I want to defend myself.
Well, hang on one second, because I was talking. I will allow you to respond. I will allow you to respond, but like I said, this has been recorded, so people do have your response for the specific question I asked about things you're required to do as a member of the white race. You gave your response, and I'm giving my interpretation of what you said. Now, I will repeat, since you did interrupt me, and then I'll let you go ahead and get your response in. This is consistent. I think anyone who's listened to this program, and I would say anyone, you can go out and do this yourself. Just ask white people, what are some of the things you're required to do as a member of the white race? Or you can ask, what are some of the ways that you practice racism, white supremacy? I suspect you will get a similar response. Privilege? Yes, exactly what you just did. I have lots of privilege as a white person. I can go out and say this, and people respond to me differently than they would if I was a black person. We get that all the time. When it gets to how do you actively participate in all of this, I don't hear as much from white people. They're very comfortable talking about being a part of this system of white supremacy, white terrorism against black people, non-white people, as long as it is in a passive, ignorant manner, as though this is just the white privilege fairy comes in at night and sprinkles white fairy dust on me and leaves me some Starbucks gift cards, a few extra passports, tickets to my favorite show, free movie passes, discounted plane tickets, and then off she goes, the white privilege fairy. They're very comfortable talking about it in that manner, and in my view, that is ridiculous. You've got to have active participation on the part of white people. This is a worldwide system in all areas of people activity, and the response that you just gave, that is very typical from what I hear from white people. I will allow you to respond now.
So I answered so we can debate whether I answered your question or not, but I thought I tried to answer your question, which is what obligation, or whatever you asked me. The way I interpret it was, I think it's really important, and I feel like one of the things that I try and do is I wrote this book, I talk about this book, I try and get these issues on the table, and that's important for me. And I think that's something that, as a white person, I need to do. More white people need to be able to talk about race. And I do that. Now, then I think the follow-up question was, how am I racist? That was the way I interpreted the second question.
I didn't ask you that.
What was that?
I didn't ask you that.
That's the way I interpreted that, which was,
that's not what I asked.
How is it that I enact white supremacy, racism?
I did not ask you that.
Okay, well, that was what I heard. And we could check the transcript on what actually was said. So those are the two distinctions. That's why I felt like I couldn't answer the second one. Sure, I'm racist. We all are. Everybody's racist, no matter what color they are. There's a lot of work that goes on, whether it's explicit or implicit, on very subtle and not subtle assaults, macro assaults, micro assaults that are about race. They're also about gender. They're also about sexuality. They're about a lot of different things. And those things, I participate in that every day. But that was, I thought what you were asking me the first time was, what obligation, in some ways, this is how I interpreted the question, which is, what obligations do I have as a white person? And I think my obligation as a white person is to talk about racism, to talk about the criminal justice system, to talk about how it is, the way in which we do social science. I'm a social scientist. How we do social science privileges white people, but it also privileges advantaged black people, right? So we're excluding people, white and black, but overwhelmingly black and brown, who are already disadvantaged. So those are the ways in which I feel obligated. Now, your second question, perhaps I misunderstood, but that was I didn't know how to answer it.
Okay. Well, again, this is being recorded, so folks, they can hear what was said, what was not said, what questions specifically were asked, and then your response. That's a matter of record. You said, and this goes back to the very beginning of the program, you said you are racist. Everybody is racist. It doesn't matter what color you are. Now, see, this is where I go back and I say, when people, white people, like I guess Dr. Becky Pettit, use the term racism or racist, definitions, very important. Now, you didn't have, at least in my opinion, you did not share with us a concise, specific definition of racism. Now, 90 minutes into the dialogue, everybody is racist. Doesn't matter what color you are. In my opinion, if we have your definition for what racism is, it would be very easy to match that up with everybody being racist to see if that's true or not. In my view, that is one of the ways, and it's not ignorance. It's not poorly informed. This is someone who has a PhD. She is a professor at a major university, student body over 40,000. This is someone, in my opinion, this would be the last person that I would label as being ignorant or poorly informed on this topic. She's written articles, gotten grants to write about this subject matter. Talking about racism without a definition allows you to do just that. You can brand any and everything racist. It can fly all over the place because it's not nailed down to exactly what do we mean when we say racist. Now, you said, doesn't matter what color you are, you can be racist. Now, I would like to know, since everybody is racist, has a non-white person ever practiced, quote-unquote, racism against you? And if so, how?
So I think at the very beginning of the show, what I said was, in the context of my book, the definition that I was thinking of in terms of racism was an institutionalized form of racism that shapes the way in which we collect information about the population and manage the criminal justice system. Those are institutions that we all participate in. We live in the U.S., whether you're a U.S. citizen or not, we participate in these institutions that shape race relations interactions. So in that way, I think we are all participating in a system of institutionalized racism.
Has a non-white person... Oh, I'm sorry, did you have more?
No, I was just, trying to clarify what I think, clarify an issue that had come up. So has a non-white person,
practiced racism against you?
Against me. That's an interesting, in the context of, so I think we all practice racism. Has it been specifically directed against me?
From a non-white person.
From a non-white person. What sort of? It's interesting. I don't know. Sure, I could probably think of some examples, but that's not the way that I sort of understand my life or my interactions with people. Certainly not in a professional setting. In a professional setting, I like to think about sort of a mutual education, and I know I'm not answering your question, but I don't really know how to characterize something, and I don't know that it would be particularly productive in relation to the kind of work that I do.
You said sure, I could probably think of some examples. I would be extremely grateful if you could think of at least one example where a non-white person or a group of people practiced racism against you, a white woman.
I don't know how to. So, yeah, I find this very interesting. Yes. Okay. So here's an example. You tell me if it's racism. I don't know. Okay. I don't know if it meets my definition of racism, and I don't know if it meets your definition of racism. So I was at a conference, and I was giving a talk, and I was on a panel with 3 black men, academics, PhDs, one at NYU, one at Penn, one at Tulane. I could tell you who they are, but that's not relevant, I don't think. I was on a panel. I was the only white person. I was also the only woman. Okay? And at the end of the day, there was a whole day, a young woman stood up. I think I might have said this already. A young woman stood up, person of color. I don't know what her racial identification is, but said, as a white woman, why don't you study successful black people? There was 500 people in the room. Now, I was called out for both my race and for my gender. And I was the only one on the panel that was called out. Now, is that an act of racism?
Is that like a rhetorical question, or are you asking?
Yeah, no, I don't. I mean, is that an act of racism in your by your definition? I mean, would that? So part of it. So here's the way that I understood this comment. It was a very aggressive comment. I may have not made it sound as aggressive as it was. But the thing that was interesting for me was I was singled out. I was identified racially. I was identified by my gender, both of which differed. No other questions about my self-identification. And my research of all was, the credibility of my research was undermined. Right? Not just the research itself, but my object of inquiry, what I wanted to study, period. Right? Which as an academic, that's who I am. That's my identity as an academic, what I choose to study. So is that an act of racism, or is that an act of professional, violation of my professionalism? Is that a violation of my gender identity? What is that? What is that? How do I break that down? And yet that's an example of the kind of the ways in which, I think about that, which to me, it didn't matter that I was white. It didn't matter that I was a woman. None of that seemed relevant. She could have just said, why don't you study successful black people? But to raise the issue of race, and to raise the issue of gender, and to raise the issue of my professional qualifications, raises these other questions. So I don't know how to interpret that. I mean, that's an example. But is that an act of racism?
I mean, the question was asked. I asked you if you could, give me an example. You said, sure, I could think of some examples. If you could provide us with a time where a non-white person practiced racism against you. So apparently you think this was a time where a non-white person practiced racism against you. My response would simply be for any non-white person who's listening to this program to, number one, think of what Dr. Pettit just shared with regards to doesn't matter that I'm a white woman. Doesn't matter that I'm white. I would say on this here planet, just let that marinate and, come to your own conclusions. Do you think it's irrelevant at any time, any place, the person doing the talking or whatever's going down, that person being classified as white, is that relevant? Is there any time where that doesn't matter to what's going on, that has no bearing on the context of the events that are unfolding, whether or not that person is white? I would say just ponder on that. You can come to your own conclusions. That was...
Well, no.
Go ahead.
Gus, but I think it's important, Gus, that she also said a white woman.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? And I think in the context, I understand where you're going with this, and I think you're right. I mean, I get that. I get it. But I think the issue is, and I think the issue is, though, I identify in lots of different ways, and maybe, I mean, this is a privilege, whatever. This is an issue for me, which is that when I'm on a panel and I'm the only white person and I'm the only woman, which identity is more important, or which identity signals me out, right? So, there are some parallels for me which maybe aren't the same. I mean, they're clearly not the same for everyone. But I think those are important issues. And I want to get back to this, which is about, I know this show is about racism, but my book is about more than just about race. It's about other markers of disadvantage, too. And that's why I think that's an important issue. I see where you're taking it, and I think that's important, and that's good for this audience. But I think that for me, and the work that I do, and why I framed it the way I did, is because there are lots of different groups of the population that are unobserved or missing or invisible, and we need to have an honest conversation about all of that.
Context of White Supremacy, the book again, which, unless I misread, shows in a myriad of ways with all kinds of charts, graphs, and data that if you are a black male, particularly if you are a black male and you drop out of school, or I think the data she has in the book, if you're a black male and you drop out of high school, you're more likely to spend time behind bars than to get married. Invisible Men, Mass Incarceration and the Myth of Black Progress, Dr. Becky Pettit. We had a person that dialed in. I think this is our caller in Alabama. Did you have a question for Dr. Pettit, caller in Alabama?
Could I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. How you doing, Gus and Dr. Pettit? Well, I had 3 questions. And I'm going to make it short, straight to the point. The first one, you said your definition, your idea of someone practice racism, when someone practiced racism against you, it was a tell me if I'm right or wrong, because my memory kind of short a little bit, but you said it was a non-white female who asked you, why don't you study more about successful black people?
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And your problem with that, she identified you as a white woman. Is that correct?
Yep.
Oh. So, but you just identify her as a non-white female. So, it's no problem for you. Excuse me, I was in the middle of saying something. So, my question to you is no problem, it's not racist for you to identify her as a non-white female, but when she identified you as a white female, all of a sudden it was a problem? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying it was a problem. It's not a problem. It wasn't a problem.
I'm confused.
The issue was, for me, that in this context, and I don't know what her racial identification was.
But you were sure it was non-white, though. I mean, you were sure it was non-white, though, right?
I don't know. I don't know. I think she was a young. I don't know.
I'm confused because you just said that. I asked you. I just asked you, and you said she was a non-white female. Now you don't know?
I never asked her.
No, I know you didn't ask her. I don't think you did, but you just told us that she was a non-white female.
So
And
the
you said that, and I asked you, and you said that's correct.
Right. So what's the question then? The question is.
The question was. I'll repeat myself, and I'll slow it down a little bit. You just stated, and I asked you. At first, you stated it was a non-white female who asked you a question, and she asked you, "Why don't you study successful black people?" And you said she was a non-white female. I got on the line. I asked you, was it a non-white female? Did you say it was a non-white female who asked you that question? And your response was yes. Okay, so it was okay for you to call her out as being a non-white female, but it was not okay for her to call you a white female?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that, actually. And I think that the characterization, I was trying to explain a situation, so I was trying to characterize the situation. In the setting, I did not respond at all. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't respond in the setting at all. I never said anything. So I was trying to explain. I think she was a young woman of color. I don't know, but that's how I'm characterizing it, and I'm not trying to justify it. And maybe just by characterizing that, I am being racist. I was trying to explain how in that setting, where my primary identity, and different people have different identities that they enact at different times. I was invited to a panel to talk about the school to prison.
That's interesting, ma'am. I want to get to my other questions, but I think you're really beating around the bush when you're saying this, because my whole question was real simple. I was like, you just identified her as a non-white female. It was no confusion. I said, was it like the way you identified her to us? I said, was it wrong for her to identify you? I don't mean to be rude, but I was just, time is valuable, and I think you're just going around the question. So could I proceed to ask you the other two questions since you won't respond to that question? Okay. All right. The other question I had to ask you was, you said we all are racist because we participate in the institution of racism. Did you say that? Am I mistaken?
I think what I said. We can check the transcripts, but I think what I said was we're all racist because we participate in the institutions in this country. We participate in. So, in the context of my book, what I study is data collection and the criminal justice system, and those are institutionalized racist institutions. I mean, and those institutions institutionalize racism. Sorry, that was not, I misspoke.
So are you saying that because we participate in the system, in the institutions in this country, that make everyone racist? Is that what you're saying, or am I misunderstanding?
Yeah, I didn't mean to say that everyone is racist. I think I said, well, I don't know. I feel like I'm talking in circles. I'm not sure. I'm
confused. So you're not sure what you said? Like you did
I know
not,
what my book is about.
Sure?
I know what my book is about, and I don't think it was wrong. So I want to go back to the one point, which is, I'm interested in your third question. I don't think it was wrong that the young woman called me out as a white woman.
Okay, so that's the second question that you don't want to answer, because I believe you said that. I heard you say that. I heard you say that everyone is racist, and then you went on to say that they're racist because they participate in this institution. That's what I heard. I could be delusional. I don't know.
I think we
like. I'm a victim of racism.
Go ahead. So yeah, do you want to ask the third question or not?
No, I'm gonna ask my third question. But I just want to state that, point that out as well. At first, you said that the woman was non-white, and you were not confused about it. And you said she was wrong for calling you a white woman, but you pointed out that she was a non-white woman. So it was okay for you to call her a non-white woman, meaning that she was not a member of your club, but it was not okay for her to call you out as a white woman. I don't think that was calling you names. I don't think anything was wrong with that. I think she was just calling you white. First of all, non-white people did not start calling white people. You white people, because you classify yourself as a white woman, so you might was practicing racism on yourself when you classified yourself as a white woman. But you as a white woman and as a white person, y'all came up with that word. So if you if you introduce me to yourself, if you introduce yourself to me and you say, hey, my name is Billy. And I say, okay, hi, Billy. And then you turn around and you say, hey, you wrong for calling me Billy. Hey, I'm not the one that came up. You the one that told me your name was Billy. How did I know your name was Billy? You said your name was Billy. We didn't come up with these terms. All right, secondly, and I'll just get to my final question. And this is going to be real simple. You said that you are all racist. And my question to you is, practicing racism, is it fun or is it more hard work? Is it fun or is it hard work? Or is it both of them? And I'll mute my line. I don't think she heard me.
I heard the question. I'm trying to figure out how to answer it. I think that there has been some unfortunate so I just want to go back to the example I was giving, which I was trying to puzzle through to think about how it fits in the different definitions of racism. And perhaps I misspoke. I don't think that the young woman was wrong in calling me out as a white woman, but I think that it drew attention to issues that I wasn't sure how to respond. And I think I'm in a position right now where I'm not sure how to respond, because what I am trying to do in my academic scholarship, my work, is to draw attention to issues of race in the criminal justice system and social exclusion. And I think that so that's what I'm trying to do in my work. And that's what I am talking about in my work, which is that these conversations that race is important, and that's why I'm talking about it. And I think my position as a white woman enables me to say things and have them be heard in a way that, for better or for worse, is what it is. But the attention in the book is that our national data collection systems and the social facts they produce are based on a normative kind of economic and domestic life, one that's stably situated in households, one that excludes inmates, and so it disproportionately excludes disadvantaged young black men. And what I'm trying to do in my work is to bring those young black men back into the conversation. That's what I'm trying to do.
But are you saying that practicing racism is more fun than hard work? Because you said that you were a racist. My question is just like clear cut, is racism more fun or is it harder work than it is fun?
My work is hard work. It's hard work. And
so practicing racism is hard work?
If my work is practicing racism, my work is I don't know. That's other.
No. I'm not asking you that. You said that you were a racist. You said that. everyone heard you say that. You know everyone heard you say that. You know you said that. So since you said that you are a racist, my question to you is it fun? Or is it hard work? Or is it both?
Right now, yeah. So right now, it's not very fun.
So right now, practicing racism is not fun. So it's hard. So practicing racism is hard work. It's more hard work than it is fun.
Yeah, I guess if that's the alternative.
Okay, well, I'll mute my line. Thanks for answering my question.
Caller at 2658. Did you have a question for Dr. Pettit, 2658?
Yes. I would like to go back under the system of racism, white supremacy, go back to the people activity of sex. I was listening to someone ask you directly on whether or not you have had sex with a white person, a non-white person, male or female, and you refused to answer the question, I believe. Sexual behavior is very essential to the practice of racism and white supremacy, in my opinion. It is shown from the beginning of the system of racism and white supremacy as being a instrumental weapon against non-white people. So by you as a white person coming on this program, you should be open, in my opinion, to answer any non-white person's question, because we don't have any personal lives. You can't have a personal life under the system of racism and white supremacy as a non-white person. It's impossible. If there's such thing as racism, which I do understand it is, and I look at it in its only functional form as white supremacy, the non-white person cannot have a personal life. Do you think it's essential that white people impose within themselves a moratorium on having sex with their non-white victims? That's my question.
Ooh. I don't have thoughts on that. I don't have thoughts on that.
You don't have what on what?
I don't have an answer to that question, I'm sorry.
I got a problem with that. Because almost every essential question that I've noticed you're being asked, something that a white person that has an intent to be helpful, you either don't have an answer to it or you play the dumb card. One of the two. That you were consistent at that since you've been on this program. And yet you're writing books stating that you have the purpose. Your purpose is to assist the system of racism and white supremacy? To end it? Is that your purpose for writing your book?
I believe I was invited on the show because I wrote a book called Invisible Men, Mass Incarceration, The Myth of Black Progress, in which I talk about how it is we collect information about the population and how it is we exclude large segments of the black population, specifically black men with low levels of education who are incarcerated. And so I'm perfectly happy talking about issues related to the book and issues related to that. I recognize your concern and your issue about how it is that different groups have different boundaries that they have and they can maintain. And I am not going to talk about my personal life on the show. I will talk about my professional work. And I'm sorry, but I just won't. I just won't. And so I'm not going to answer that question about my personal life. And I think for other people, I mean, that's not the work I do. I don't have an informed view on that. It's not my research. And so that may be an issue that might be relevant in another show, or it may be relevant for you to talk with Gus. But I'm not going to be. I have nothing to say about that.
Okay, but I'm not asking you directly about your personal life. I heard the conversation, and you said that before, so therefore I didn't ask you about your personal life. I'm asking in general. You as a quote-unquote white person. I haven't read your book, and I'm probably not going to read your book, because just off of what I'm listening to, you don't sound like you're sincere at all. And I have come across white people who are very similar to your behavior on this program, and so it doesn't motivate me to read something from someone who does not seem to be a sincere person. So I'm not asking you about your personal life or whether or not you've had sex. That was somebody else's question. My question was, do you think that having sex with non-white people is helpful to non-white people in the context of white supremacy, or should white people impose a universal moratorium on saying that I am not going to have sex with non-white people because it will injure them further and would further continue the system of racism and white supremacy? Do you think that is something to consider and put in place by white people? That's what I was asking you. I was asking you nothing about your personal life.
Yeah, I mean that's not something that I'm comfortable talking about on the show. Thank you.
Once again, under the system of racism and white supremacy, non-white people don't have a comfortable zone at all.
I understand.
And just by you identifying the idea that you want to remain comfortable tells me something about you as a person.
Thank you.
Well, I guess I won't get an answer to that. You already gave me an answer, though. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Gus.
Right on. Before we wrap things up, since you retracted, you said that the non-white female at the panel discussion that you were on with the other black male professors, that she didn't do anything incorrect by saying, you as a white woman, why don't you study successful black people, or however she phrased her response. Since that was the response that you gave when I asked if you could share with us a time when a non-white person practiced racism against you, and you said, sure, I could probably think of some examples. That leads me to believe that maybe you have more than one time where you think a non-white person practiced racism against you. So since you're saying that she didn't do anything incorrect, do you have another example of a non-white person practicing racism against you?
So I'm not sure. I mean, I think that I may be misunderstanding how you're talking about racism. And I think there's a definitional difference between the way you characterized it and I think I characterized it. And so I'm not going to hazard another example. Because I think the one that I thought we could use to talk about these definitional issues has not been as constructive as I had hoped. So I don't have another example.
For the record, I don't recall saying that the example that you shared was not an example of racism. For the record, I just said, okay, that's what you shared. I didn't offer an opinion either way or a judgment. I didn't tell you that was incorrect or flawed at all. I listened, and particularly just about you saying that you being a white person wasn't relevant to that situation. But so you don't have another example of a non-white person practicing racism against you?
No.
Right on. She authored the book. I will assume, I don't see any more hands. I will assume everybody is good. She authored the book Invisible Men, Mass Incarceration, and the Myth of Black Progress. The word racism does not appear anywhere in the book. Professor at the University of Washington did say that she was a racist on the program. Dr. Becky Pettit. Fascinating. Definitely appreciate you sharing a bit of your Monday evening. Has been an interesting exchange. I hope people who tuned into the broadcast learned something, and if they should happen to see, because she, as I said, she did the segment on PBS and had an article in the New York Times, so if you should happen to see any of her work out in public, definitely keep your ears and eyes open from this point forward and closely evaluate what she has to say on the topic of racism or any other related subject matter. Anything you want to say before we close things out?
No, I mean, I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show. Now, I hope I didn't, I'd be more than happy to talk to people further about the book. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Pleasure was ours. Right here in Gus's backyard, University of Washington, joining us live, Dr. Becky Pettit. Thank you kindly. We will keep an eye out for your work. I saw you on PBS, so I'll be mindful when I'm strolling the campus in case I see you around. I will make sure I give a how-do if I should see you. Enjoy the rest of your Monday evening, and we will speak soon.
Thanks.
Evening. Context of White Supremacy. I had to send this to Dr. Tommy Curry. I don't know if he has heard Dr. Pettit live and in person talking about racism. It might just be that he read her book, where she does give some interesting information. Just the stat that I gave before about if you are a black male, you are more likely to go to prison than to get married if you drop out of high school. She has a lot of interesting little tidbits about racism, white supremacy in the book. But with regards to actual meaty information, how we're going to solve this problem and how white people, the nuts and bolts about how white people go about doing all of this, not so much. And this would be another example of why I say consistently, I don't know if I've been saying it as much of late, but I have said pretty consistently, do not purchase these white people's books. Like, this is not a book I would recommend anyway. But even the times, like if I could think of a book, Two-Faced Racism, for example, Dr. Joe Fagan, I've said that book does have a ton of great information because it's pretty much Dr. Welsing's question, what do white people talk about when there are no non-white people around? That's what the whole book is about. How white people change the way that they talk about racism once all the non-white people vanish. That's what his whole book is about. It's journal entries. You get to hear directly what some of those conversations sound like. So I've said repeatedly, that's one of my top books, favorite books on racism. He's been a guest on the program. I recommend it. But there's no need to purchase that book because we really should not be funding these white people, funding racists for writing about their system of terrorism. So I just encourage either go to the library. A lot of these books you can easily get from your local library, particularly if you have access to a major university. They likely will have, if not all, large number of these texts. They'll have, you can just get it for free, take notes, whatever the case. A lot of these books are available online in PDF or ebook format. If you, as I said, major university, you should be able to get them there. And or if you gotta have it, like Two-Faced Racism, I wanted that for my personal library, used copy. I knocked my plug by accident, sorry. Like Two-Faced Racism or any other books that a white person wrote, just get a used copy. That way you're not filling their coffers with any of your hard-earned nickels. Because in my opinion, whites like Dr. Pettit, they should not be benefiting and getting coins, props in any way, shape, or form for putting out a book or 3 or 50 on racism. That should not be happening at all. And I know even beyond the money part, it really, I'm sure that most of these white people, at least I've heard a lot of them say that they don't earn billions of dollars for these books. I know Timothy Wise has said that he doesn't earn a lot of money for his books, and some of the other white people who've been on the program have said that they don't get tons of dollars for their books. That shouldn't be discounted. Make sure that that is the case, that they're not getting a lot of money, at least not getting non-white dollars. But I think also they get a lot of currency. They get that label of being a good white person. I think even Dr. Pettit, she said that non-white people, when she goes out and gives these talks and gives these seminars, they'll be like, oh yeah, right on. We know it. And I'm sure she gets some of that Tim Wise response. Thank you so much, white woman, for speaking about these issues and telling the truth. And oh my goodness, we appreciate it. I'm positive she gets a lot of that. She didn't have oodles of stories of black people seeing her at seminars and thinking, oh my God, this racist is in here trying to confuse us. She didn't say that. So that in and of itself, in my view, is even worth more than the currency, because it plants that seed that there are well-meaning white people. There are white people that are not racist. There are white people that are redeemable. And I've concluded that if that is simply not accurate. And hopefully there will be a day soon where people like her, when they write their books and go out, all they get is questions. Questions and suspicions. No pat on the back, no hugs, no tears, no can I have an autograph, no can I take your picture, none of that. Just the assumption that this is another white person practicing racism, trying to confuse us with jargon and inaccuracies about their system of white terrorism, and or trying to convince us that there are some white people who are not racist, who are in the business of helping out non-white people, and are definitely not about deceiving, terrorizing individuals they classify as not white. Hopefully that day will be coming soon, where that's what happens every time she goes out to give a panel discussion. It'll sound just like tonight. Everyone, the type of questions that get asked, and people just paying attention to what she says. We'll take a quick commercial break, and if anyone has any closing thoughts on what Dr. Pettit had to share on the broadcast, we'll hear those as well. Quick commercial break, and we should be right back. Hang tight. Hang tight.
RacismDaily.com, your number one source for global news reports on race, racism, and overt actions of white supremacy. From Asia to the Americas, to Europe, to Australia, to Africa, racism is not a thing of the past, it is our current reality. Be informed, be globally informed. You should be the first to know. RacismDaily.com, RacismDaily.com, RacismDaily.com.
Is racism hurting you? On issues of race, are you unable to speak, think, and act with clarity and confidence? Are you tired of laughing when nothing is funny, smiling when you are not happy, agreeing when you really disagree? At counterracism.com, you can learn specific strategies and techniques to counter the behaviors of the people who practice racism in all areas of activity, using words correctly, following counter-racist logic, even counter-racist science projects designed to reveal what racism is, how it works, and how to counter it. The open-source code writing format allows you to pick and choose from a variety of counter-racist suggestions so you can produce the code that works for you. Stop by counterracism.com today and help replace racism with justice.
That's counter-racism.com.
Do you need a one-stop shop for all of your multimedia needs? Triumphant Multimedia is a skilled team of professionals with a passion for great marketing and chic design. Our specialties include consulting, brand development, copywriting, and creative graphic design that's second to none. We also offer photography, photo retouching, videography, and video editing. At Triumphant Multimedia, our goal is to provide highly effective creative solutions built to suit any individual need or budget. Give us a call at 678-732-8067 or check us out online at trimultimedia.com.
Hi everyone, welcome. This is Justice with the C.O.W.S radio program. If you want to learn about, understand, and counter racism, white supremacy, be sure not to miss a C.O.W.S episode. We keep them jammed, packed with constructive information to sharpen your use of words to help eliminate the system of racism, white supremacy, ASAP. Also, to be able to invest in my counter-racist efforts, co-hosting the C.O.W.S radio programs, please visit my blog, justdojustice.blogspot.com.
You're just saying just buckets and buckets of work.
I got an uncle real crazy. My Uncle B, 55 years old, hates white people, married to a white lady. And he sit around going, these crackers ain't shit, except for Susan. And he tried to explain the whole thing to me one day, saying, yeah, I got a white wife, I love her, she loves me, that's all that matters. But I tell you this, if the revolution ever come, I'll kill her first, just to show these crackers I mean business. Motherfucking cracker ass, motherfucking cracker, shit cracker motherfucker. Hey, hi, honey. Motherfucking cracker, I'll kill my cracker kids too.
Dr. Pettit. Oh, wait a minute. I had to make sure I get this in.
You're just saying just buckets and buckets of work.
Amen. Dr. Pettit emailed me in the short amount of time since she exited to offer her thanks. She said she learned a lot, appreciated the opportunity to be on the program. I'm sure there is some refinement going on as we speak for what she will do the next time she encounters such unconfused victims. I am certain. I'm even a tad surprised because this is not the first time. This is my backyard. We've had quite a few professors on from the University of Washington, so I'm a little surprised that they have not, networked to be like, oh man, watch out for that Gus dude. You do not want to be on that Negroes program. A little surprised that they haven't passed that information around because we've had quite a few different professors, students, faculty members at UW on the broadcast. At any rate, we will be back tomorrow. Dr. Yaba Blay, she should be on the broadcast. Same program time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. She is a black female. She has, I think, a lot of great information. She seems a lot less confused about racism, white supremacy. She's supposed to be with us back in December, but we had to reschedule and what have you. So tune in tomorrow, Dr. Yaba Blay. You can check out, she has some YouTube videos up. You can check out her website and see some of the articles she has authored as well. But that'll be tomorrow. And then on Thursday, we should have Patsy Spears, black female. She's in the UK. She was the one I was saying before. She had the report last week where she was talking about her experience growing up in the UK and how they smeared feces in her mailbox and all these other forms of abuse. I said, if folks would listen, I think it was last Thursday, I spoke with her. We talked for about an hour, and she said that Exactly what I said to Dr. Pettit. It's under the rubric that it's older white men, right, who practice racism. It's these crotchety old white men and or crotchety old white women who are geriatrics. They're about to die anyway. They're the only ones who practice racism. And once they keel over, this problem will be all good, because the young white people, they are not into racism. They are quote unquote colorblind. They don't care what you are. They're just, everything is all good, and they're not into all that stuff. And I told her that I thought that was totally false, inaccurate, and I said that if you just pay attention to how many reports that you'll see where it's young white people, white teenagers, look at what's going on in the schools and whatnot, you'll see tons of them where it's young white people that are practicing racism. And she thought about it for a second, and she said, there was an incident recently. She had already told me this, but she was reflecting on it. She said that incident that I told you about, where it was a white person following me and making monkey noises and tormenting me, obviously white terrorism. She said he was like 16 years old, 15 years old. I hadn't even thought about it. And I said, that is what I'm talking about. That is exactly what I'm talking about. And I appreciate any time I get to talk with a non-white person and they're, open to reflecting and maybe rethinking some of the different ways, kind of cliche ways that white people get us to think about and talk about racism. But she should be here. Obviously, since she's in the UK, it will not be at the normal broadcast time. It should be at 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central, and 12 noon Pacific this Thursday, I guess early afternoon, depending on where you happen to be in the world. But that should be cool to hear on the program. She's a little bit old. When I say older, she's older than I am. She's a little bit older, so it'll be good to kind of hear her perspective about how things have evolved in the UK, how she was treated as an immigrant. She's from the islands, how she was treated. She's also a midwife as well, so I think it'll be interesting on a lot of different levels. Anywho, tune in Thursday. Tomorrow, normal time, and then Thursday, much earlier than normal. I'll give out a reminder. So folks, if you're able to tune in while you're on the plantation or wherever else you happen to be Thursday afternoon, tune in. I think it's always fantastic to hear from black people, non-white people who are in different parts of the globe. We will hit the phone lines, see if anybody has anything that they want to share. I will get the people who didn't get an opportunity to participate first, to see if they have anything that stood out or any commentary on what they heard from Dr. Pettit. The person that called in from a blocked number and the person who called in at 0748. 0748, your lines are both open. Did you all have anything you wanted to share before we get the folks who already got to ask questions?
Good evening, everyone. This is Karma. I am so appreciative to the caller who pointed out her reaction to, being called a white woman, because I had missed it, but she was. This is just something I'm just now noticing, that being called a color or something like the Latina or the Indian or the black woman, that's not just an adjective for white people. That's a qualifier. That means you're not quite there. I'm putting that in front to show that you're a woman, but you're not really a woman. You're a black woman, so you're not quite a woman. And I just never realized that. And I really appreciate the caller pointing that out. I think I'm going to try that a few more times in the future to see if I get the same vigorous response from white women being called white women. And plus, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think she was as upset about being called a woman, putting out as a woman, as so much as being called a white woman. But I could be incorrect. I think that we're just trained to accept whatever our betters want to call us and not take offense to that, whether it's Toby or Bertha or a black woman, so I really appreciate having that pointed out. I don't think, Gus, you heard us comment on that before. It was one time when you were stuck in the digital divide, and so we just had an inner caller talk.
I heard that. I thought it was you who brought that point up, in fact, about white people being bothered about being branded as a white person. I think, yeah, it was the weekend that I was having difficulties on the phone, but I did hear that segment.
Anyway, I almost missed that. That's good.
Yes. One of the things that I caught spotted was she was talking about, I think it was when you asked her about giving an example about a non-white person practicing racism towards her, I think. And it may have been that same incident about the non-white female she pointed out. And she said something about her credibility being questioned. And then she said her authority. She used the term authority being questioned. Do you remember that part, or she used the word authority?
I would have to go back to listen again to see specifically about the word authority. If she said that, I definitely remember the portion that you're talking about, where she was saying, she was questioned and her validity and all that. I would have to go back to verify if she said the word authority specifically.
Yes, I thought when she said that a white woman was coming out like, who are you to question me? I know what I'm talking about. What I say goes, and you can't question me. So that's what I thought she was coming from. But she became more codified, like white codification. Just speaking in one direction and then turning to another, and saying, "Well, let me go back to my book." And I do remember that example. Just a whole bunch of head spinning language. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have right now. She did use that term, authority.
That'll be one. I'll pay attention to that in the archives that she used it, but that is definitely one of those. You're never. I mean, that's like the what they call the black code. You are never supposed to question the authority and the intellect of a white person. Like never, ever, never, ever, ever. I think there have been quite a few black people who have been lynched as a result of doing that, questioning a white person. I did also, I think, to Karma's point, I thought she was trying to be really slick with the conflation. I definitely think what you said is valid about her being identified as a white person, which she is. But I also thought that she tried to throw in the woman thing to be like, oh, it's because of gender, because I thought she was trying to emphasize that she was the only woman on the panel, and it was the other members of the panel were all black males, and it was me as a woman and me as white. And I think just the conflation, what I've said before, because then they can pull in everything and say, well, because I think she did say it's not just racism, it's gay rights and sexism and heteronormativity and blah, blah. Then they can just throw in the whole fruit salad. See, it's not just race. You got a whole bunch of things going on here. Don't be thinking that it's just racism is the problem. It's a lot of things going on. I thought she did try to weave that in as well. But I think it's both, because I think you're all certainly correct about her being branded as a white person. That was a problem for her.
She also said, not only that we are privileged, I could be inaccurate, but she is close to it. She said that it's not just about white people being privileged, but also advantaged blacks or something like that.
Mm-hmm. I wrote that down. I want to be an advantaged black person. I wrote that down. I was gonna get in like, what does that mean? What is an advantaged black person? But I mean, I was just like, that's just, you're not even gonna get me off into the wilderness trying to figure out what that is and all of this. But yeah, advantaged black person. I wrote that down and put it in bold-face print.
And then that also reminded me of that. I think that, what is her name? Dr. Trepanier, when I think it was You and Justice, she just got to that point where she was like, I'm not going to answer. I don't know. It's that moment right there where it's no more lanes. There's no more course of action to take. So I just back out, say, I don't know, or short answers.
I think she would have done the tier thing if this had been like live and in person, perhaps as a means for getting out of it. But yeah, particularly once the sex thing started coming after she had already been outed on her example of racism, and then the sex thing came back up. Like, I could definitely have seen the waterworks begin to hopefully get some victims to come to her aid. And, oh my God, you've made this white woman cry. What is wrong with you? Type of thing. If this had been like a live, in-person, face-to-face discussion.
Has that ever happened that, like, when you had those discussions on race, has any white woman tried to bring out a waterworks?
Yes. Not on the program, because I just don't think it would be as effective because you can't see the person. But at the University of Washington, no less, it was a group of people. It was non-white people and white people. They were having this dialogue on racism, and I think we were asking the white woman. It was a white woman. We were asking her same thing, just asking her questions. You know, what are ways that you've practiced racism? Blah blah blah. Same type of procedure, and they were doing that. They were expecting to do exactly like Dr. Pettit, acting silly and bringing all this other stuff in and not being accurate. And she got to the point where I could see it. Like, that's something I try to be on the lookout for. If it looks like a white person is going to try to get emotional and tear up, and I saw it, like her face started getting red, and you could just see it was about to come in. And I just said immediately, it looks like you're about to cry, if you're going to do that, please leave. That's one of the worst things that you can do as a white person. Anytime there's a dialogue on racism, is to start crying, because we have been conditioned to be Hattie McDaniel, Legend of Bagger Vance, and all of our sympathy goes to you. Oh my goodness, we didn't mean to make you feel bad, and you're so courageous for being here and just being a part of this discussion, and we just need more white people like you, and we could get, it totally erodes any of the constructive value. Just nip that in the bud immediately. And I even referenced a white woman, Farrell Winfrey, where she said that she cried. She talked about it on the program. She said she did that. She started tearing up, and a black person called her out, told her never to do that, and explained why. And she said that's totally right. She excused herself, and she says she shares that from henceforward. And I did that. She did not cry. And all of the non-white people that were present, they understood what I was saying. No one got upset with me. No one fussed at me and told me, you can't tell her how to feel, or this is emotional. None of that happened. Pin drop silence, and the conversation proceeded as it should have. So I would encourage anyone, if you feel like it, the white person, if they're getting peppered with good questions and looking like they're running out of options of what they want to say, their deception is not working, be on the lookout. If it looks like the tears might be coming, just go ahead and interrupt and call that out and just explain. It totally shuts down the conversation. Just excuse yourself. It's not that you can't cry. Just excuse yourself, get yourself back together emotionally, and then rejoin the dialogue.
In her book, can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
In her book, did she write anything about an example of a non-white person practicing racism?
She doesn't use the term racism in her book. She mostly just talks about how how non-black males are not counted with regards to a lot of different times when they do studies to gauge how well black people are doing or not doing with regards to education or wages or academic success or dropout rates and all these voter turnout, how the large number of black prisoners or folks that are incarcerated or wherever they happen to be, that leaving them out tends to disproportionately make it seem like black people are doing better than they are. And when you factor them back in, the picture looks a lot more bleak. That's the gist of and it's not a very long book, but that's the gist of what it's about. And then ways that ways that the larger population of black people who are not in greater confinement, ways that they are also adversely impacted by black people, black males specifically, being in greater confinement. That's the gist of the book. But there are no examples of non-white people, black people practicing racism or white people being victims of racism. In fact, all of the statistics that she lines up, like she shows how if you drop out of high school, you're more likely to go to jail. If you just get a little bit of college but don't graduate, you're more likely to go to jail. It's a little bit better than dropping out of high school. But she shows where the same is true for white people. Like a white person is more likely to go to prison if they drop out of high school as opposed to getting a degree. But it's way worse for a black person. That's what she shows every time. That's like whatever quote unquote disadvantages you would have as a white person, they would multiply exponentially if you were a black person.
Yeah, because to me it appears to be a pattern, especially with white females that are so-called educated and college professors and whatnot, writers. That's a carrot in order to because they understand that when a white person gives some smidgets of truth, that it's going to attract large numbers of non-white people, especially black people, who just going to praise her as Jesus' mother, Mary, and whatever. I mean, and what I did tonight, it will go off all right on a program like yours, but out in the general public, it'll be some non-white, unfortunately, be some non-white black people who would get on me and say, "Hey, whoa, wait a minute! This white woman is trying to show some regard towards racism. Why are you getting on her and whatever that sort of thing?" Because that's normally the behavior that they have manipulated us into in our starvation for a white person to admit something about racism, that sort of thing. And I mean, I don't have a word guide, but if I had a word guide and I had a definition for jive ass white woman, I probably have a picture somewhere on it, as far as that's concerned, because it's a pattern that I noticed like that. But when you press them, which they shouldn't mind. They shouldn't mind to be pressed, and I don't care if they don't mind or not. I'm gonna ask anyway. I can at least ask, and if I feel I sense somewhere where they're uncomfortable at, that's the direction I'm heading in, because from there, that white person can be exposed, in my mind, and it appears that, and most of them are going to be uncomfortable with the subject of sex, because most, especially white people that is in her bracket of people active of education, excuse me, that are writing on racism, they have some sort of a sexual connection with non-white people, with the very people that they say they intend to help. They're having sex with them, and they should be challenged on it. And I think you said, or somebody said within the program, that there should be a subject that they shouldn't be willing to be with us on. As far as that's concerned, when they come into us, and whatever for interviews and whatnot. I mean, I've heard thousands of interviews by people, and they don't just talk about the subject matter if it's a book or something like that. They want that person is asked all kinds of questions. And a lot of times that person answers the questions and whatnot. I didn't see anything wrong with her answering the question. And even if she didn't want to talk about, her own personal sexual activity, what about the overall question about sex and sex between white people and non-white people? It should have been something that she, if she was sincere, that she should have gave some attention to.
Shame.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I also agree with caller about like when the suspected, well, not gonna say suspected because she admitted. Well, the racist white woman, when she said that she was not comfortable answering that question, I kind of hear that a lot of times coming from white people who call the program, and they say, well, they're not comfortable. And I remember I asked one lady that, I'm like, what is the appropriate level of comfort you're supposed to have when talking about racism? Should it be comfortable for white supremacists or suspected white supremacists to talk about white supremacy? I think you even stated this in one program you did, when you said when the robbery suspect or rape suspect is being questioned about the rape that they committed, should they be comfortable talking about it? You know what I'm saying? It's like, you know, and I'm kind of, I wonder, is that logical to assume that when the suspected racist is talking to a victim of white supremacy, is that logical to suspect them of practicing racism as soon as they say they are not comfortable? Because I think that, I could be wrong, but I think that could be anytime a white person is talking about white supremacy and they say they're not, that the black person is making them feel, the victim of racism is making them feel uncomfortable. I think that's like a subtle way of attacking them or even practicing racism, white supremacy, because as a victim of a crime, if I'm asking you about the crime that you committed, you know, it shouldn't matter if you're comfortable or not. And in fact, I like to ask this question too: is it logical for me to be outright offended and letting them know that I'm offended, that they even think their level of comfort even means anything? You know, the audacity of a criminal who committed a crime being questioned about the crime they committed and saying, hey, I'm not comfortable with these line of questions about the crime I committed. You know, the audacity of a criminal to even make such a bold statement like that, it just overwhelms me. But yeah, I'm in my line.
I think that's very logical, particularly in this context, because we're just sitting on the phone. That's what I've said that repeatedly. When not all, but when some of the people, non-white people who listen to the program, and they say that they get uncomfortable when these white people are uncomfortable on the program, and I've said repeatedly, like, on what basis? We're just sitting on the phone. This person is not losing their job. She's not losing book sales. She's not being called any names. She doesn't require medical attention. She could be sitting, you know, in her plush plantation house in her footies in a bathrobe. I mean, it's on the phone. Like, you know, what do you mean uncomfortable? It's not like you're out in the hot sun, dehydrated, digging a trench or a ditch or being asked to clean a sanitation plant. I mean, it's just like, come on, man. Come on. All of that. You're on whatever level of quote unquote discomfort you are experiencing just by being on the phone talking about your book and racism, it pales in comparison to the victims of racism. So, I mean, really, I would say in any circumstances, what you just said would be totally accurate in terms of just being offended by them saying that they're not comfortable with these questions, but particularly just sitting on the phone talking about your book and racism. I mean, really.
And by her being so reluctant to answer the question, in all practical purposes, she did answer the question.
And I was going to ask her, but she kind of did the dodgeball on that question. because at one moment she said that everybody practices racism because they participate in the system or in the institution of white supremacy. I said, well, if you put a gun to my face and rob me, that's what I wanted her to defend. Because she said everybody is racist because they participate in this institution, in a racist institution. And I'm like, I wanted to ask her, but she was dodging the question so bad, she even went back and said, hey, I didn't even mean to say that. That's how slick of a snake that's how slick of a racist these people are. They even say, hey, I ain't even mean to say it. I take that back. You know what I'm saying? So I wanted to ask, I was like, so if you put a gun to my face and rob me, and I go in my pocket and give you the money that you ordered me to give you with the gun in my face, does that make me a robber? Because I participated in the robbery. You put a gun in my face, told me to give you my money. What else am I going to do? You know what I'm saying? It's ridiculous. And one more thing, Gus, I want to say, and I'm going to mute my line for good. I came across a song. I grew up amongst older generation African Americans, like born 1912 all the way to 1940. You see what I'm saying? I was raised around my grandma, my great grandmama, and me. So I was listening to different songs people used to sing and stuff like that, and I was listening to another song. This song I actually never heard, but it came on the feed on YouTube when I was listening to one of the other songs I grew up listening to. But it's a song, and if you don't mind, probably checking it out. It's a chain gang song from down south. African Americans used to sing while they was on the chain gang, and since the whole context of this program is about codification, that kind of what the song was about. It's called Grizzly Bear. A chain gang song called Grizzly Bear. And I don't know how to really share things on YouTube. I might try to put it on your page, but if you don't mind, would you look at it on YouTube? But it's a song called Grizzly Bear, and they're talking about white supremacists in code while they're singing. They because they couldn't go outright talk about how upset they are with the white supremacists because they'll be punished. But the song was cold about how they how they feel about white supremacy. It's a good song. I like it. I try to share it, but I mute my line.
I will check it out.
Thank you.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. It got real quiet. I thought maybe something got cut off. Yeah, like I mentioned, it's a pattern with white people that when it gets to something that some bit of information that we can actually move forward on, is when that white person is reluctant to actually they become exposed. In my mind, they become exposed when they are reluctant or literally refuse to answer questions. Because under the system of racist white supremacy, we meaning the victims don't have private lives. It's impossible, in my mind, to have a quote-unquote private life and be a victim of racism, white supremacy. And they have constantly, through history, used their penises and vaginas as weapons against us, to where it's intoxicated our minds and our spirits to the standpoint to where we don't know our nose from our anus. From after they get through dealing with us sexually, and it just makes me want to vomit when I hear one of them have the nerve to be in our presence and be reluctant to answer questions, and then have the nerve to be writing books on racism. And as you said, they don't even have the word racism in the book, but yet that's what you're talking about. I mean, I can sit and watch the local television program and get the same thing from that foolishness.
Did she say she had the? Oh, did she say she had the word race in it instead of racism?
No, I heard through the program that in her book the words racism wasn't even printed in the book. Is that correct, Gus?
Yes, sir. She does not have the word racism in the book, but right. The word race is in the book.
Oh, okay.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir. You're a little low.
Oh, okay. How, just me speaking up, or is it something wrong with the connection?
You're good now. We can hear you, Mr. Demery.
Oh, okay. I just was wondering if anyone on the line ever expects any of these suspected races to be truthful or to admit that they are practicing racism. Because I thought it was kudos to the caller from Alabama who asked her if it was fun practicing racism or if it was hard work. That was an excellent question. And, you know, if you think about it, if you really are a racist and you feel superior and you're talking to some feeble-minded, non-white black people, why don't you just, like the movies at the end of the movie, when the bad man is busted, everybody knows his game is up, and he just comes out and tells you, yeah, I was like that. That was my plan all along. And this is the way I planned it, and this is what I wanted it to turn out to be. You know, it's never going to happen. That's all part of practicing racism. But I noticed that one of her collaborators, Mr. Brian Skipes, is a black man. And he was at the University of Washington. She briefly mentioned something about him and that how he had moved on. But they collaborated on some works, and they probably collaborated on a little more than some works, because I saw a picture of him and her, and that's why that question about whether or not she was involved with a non-white male sexually she was so sensitive about that. So I suspect that her and Brian probably had a little bit more going on than what she wanted to admit. And it's like the one caller. Well, when I asked her, did she think any of her work had improved society as a whole, and she couldn't give me any instances where any improvements have been made behind any of her research or any of her books, it leads you to believe, why are you doing it? Because if you're getting a grant from the Russell Sage Foundation, you know, tens of thousands of dollars, that is the reason why you're doing this, not as a sociologist, not to improve the social conditions of the United States, but to just profit on the disparities and the misfortune of your subjects, or whatever you want to call it, if you feel like you're supreme. But kudos to the callers on the sexual question and on the caller from Alabama with his intriguing questions. I'll mute my line.
We have about 2 minutes left in the program. 2 minutes. Anybody have anything quickly they want to get in? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I guess I don't want to be offending or nothing like that. But you remember you told me to stay on you about it or whatever like that. Are you still gonna do that video about when it was about
the Welsing video with the film with Michael J. Fox, where he has yeah. Absolutely. Just I'm not offended by that at all. Just feel free. Ask whenever you feel like it. Stay on me. I will get it done. I just have been a little lax in getting my video work together. But yeah, stay on me. I have been able to view the film at this point, so I saw the clip that you were talking about, and I got the Dr. Welsing audio that you sent to match up with it. So yeah, just stay on me. We will get it done. I'm not offended by that at all.
Okay, Curmudgeon is the website is your page you active on YouTube, and in the Curmudgeon.
Correct.
Okay, because I know I subscribe to two Kyle's pages on YouTube. One of them when they had a Native American who was speaking about Mesoamericans, and I think it's some about I forgot the title, where he gives a speech and you show a clip of the speech on one of them, or somebody shows the clip, and I subscribe to some money as well. But yeah, I'll mute my line. And before you go, could you also say when the next time you have a program? And that's probably all. Thank you.
Do that as well. Anything? Everybody good? Everybody good? I guess before we ride out, Mr. Demery 4, I thought you, when you asked your questions, you said you think when white people do these sort of books or projects or whatever, that they are trying to see how effective the system is working, if I'm remembering accurately. I guess before we wrap up, if you could explain what you meant when you said that.
Yes. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. It's just like I was saying, if your premise was to come up with these statistics or conclusions about something to make the situation better, then you would include some solutions at the end of your book or some ways to make things better. But when you investigate these works, there's no solutions at the end. They can come up with all these statistics. You can say what you believe should happen, but there's no solutions. There's no, answers to what you come up with. So, and then when you look deeper, you see how they've made money off of, these disparities or the misfortune of others. So that was your goal, not to help, but to further exploit. And so the system has to have a way to gauge how well it's working. So if you look at the different times I ask guests about the foundations that they receive money from, and they seem to get a little embarrassed behind it. But the whole thing is, all these foundations is I believe, is a cover-up, to have people working to give back feedback to let you know if the system is effective. Because if we have the majority of black people in prison, and we have the prison industrial system where we're making money for virtually nothing, it's just like slavery, then, and the majority of non-whites, then it's working. If medical disparities or have a high mortality rate for blacks and non-whites, but yet still we're discovering cures for basically white illnesses, our system is working. I mean, it's just, to me, it's a logical deduction because that's all I can see that's coming from it. I mean, I could be incorrect, but does that seem logical?
Makes sense. Makes sense. Confirmation that things are checking out. A-OK on the plantation worldwide.
Makes sense to me also.
I think, too, the few good white people, the few good, well-meaning white people, I think that's one thing I would not underestimate. When white people like her or whoever else, Timothy Wise and the rest of these folks, Dr. Barbara Trepanier, I think they get a lot of mileage off of us thinking that these folks are about it. They're for real. They're serious. They are not racist, and they're trying to help solve this problem. I think they get a lot of currency out of confusing non-white people and to get having a hope that there are some good white people that are not racist, and that is not accurate. And I think that it opens the door for a lot of inaccuracies and misunderstandings of what it means to be white, what the system of racism, white supremacy is all about, and the fact that white people have no intention of voluntarily ending their system of global terrorism against black people, non-white people. Very important, crucial aspect of all of these documentaries and books and blah, 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 blah. We should be back tomorrow. Next program, tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, and 5 p.m. Pacific. Dr. Yaba Blay. She'll be with us, black female. She is less confused about the system. She should be with us normal broadcast time. And then we'll be back again on Thursday, not the normal broadcast time, 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central, and 12 noon Pacific. Patsy Spears, she'll be with us live from the UK. She is also a black female, to get some of her thoughts, what she's experienced over in the UK, and just her thoughts on how this system is going to wind down. It seems she knows a good number of well-meaning white people, too, over there in the UK. With that, I hope, in addition, great questions from all the folks who called in and or the people that just called in at the end to share their commentary, observations. The importance of having a definition for racism. If you do not have a definition for racism, or if you don't recognize the importance of making sure that you ask the other person what is their definition of racism, it really allows white people to, just be super deceptive. They can, you talk about being slick, they can pretty much say whatever they want. It doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to match up to anything. Once you don't have a definition laid down, what do you mean when you say racism? It just gives you carte blanche to say whatever you want. And in my view, I don't think it's any coincidence. She starts off acknowledging that she does not even use the term racism in the book. She doesn't have a definition for the term and prefers to see it that way. And then you get 90 minutes into the dialogue and everybody is racist. That works beautifully when you don't have a definition for racism. And I think white people, they know most victims of racism, we do not value the importance of terms and definitions. That is crucial. This problem is not going to go anywhere, in my opinion, until we get a better grasp of how vitally important terms and definitions are, especially a definition for racism. Anywho, thanks for everyone tuning in. I hope it was a constructive investment of your Monday evening. If you are not getting constructive information, or if it's not of value for you to check out the program, definitely don't listen. We have too many problems to be wasting time tuning in to broadcasts where you're not getting useful information that's helping you get a better grasp of racism and things that can be done to try to solve this problem. So we definitely don't want people tuning in unless you see some constructive value in what's happening here at the C.O.W.S. Fundraising for the month of March. Thanks to everyone who has invested, listener-supported Counter Racist Radio. The address for the blog is racism-notes.blogspot.com. Racism-notes. radio.blogspot.com. Listener-supported, counter-racist radio. Thanks to all for investing. Hopefully we will hit our March fundraising goal. We are closing in, almost there, and we still got a week to go. So looking forward to nabbing that up as well. Thanks again. We will be back soon. Anybody want to do the prayer to wrap things up? Cool. In the game, I will do it myself. I would even say keep that in mind, the broadcast today, since the white people being ignorant came up prominently. I would say keep everything that you heard in mind today, the questions and observations from the listeners and the exchange we had with the guest, some of the suppositions that she made while she was here. Keep that in mind when you hear white people glowing about Fruitvale Station and really any of these other films. Keep that in mind. I'm of the opinion that these sort of films, as what Mr. Demry said, system is working well. Black people can be killed at will, at any time, and at most, maybe they'll get a TV movie of the week or a film or a back section in the newspaper until we move on to the next one. That sort of thing, I think it is a boost to the system of racism, white supremacy, to let them know that the system is still working wonderfully well. Their foot is still on our necks collectively, worldwide, and they just enjoy it. It's a snuff. That's exactly what I said about Fruitvale Station. It's a snuff flick. We get to go and have our popcorn and make it a weekend movie rental or Netflix rental to sit back, kick our heels up, and watch how this black male got shot down. And whine and cry about it when we get out in public as though this really offended us, as though we have a problem with this, when we know that is exactly the way we've set things up to be. This is going to continue to happen if we have our druthers forever. You'll be having Renisha McBride, Oscar Grants, Jonathan Farrells. You'll have those incidents forever. I would say keep the exact same sort of thinking and dialogue that we had today. Keep that in mind when you hear white people talking about either the news events, what I said, those news events around those particular people, Renisha McBride, Jonathan Farrell, and or their film responses to things like 12 Years a Slave, Fruitvale Station, same sort of thing. Same sort of thing. That is just white pathology on display. They enjoy seeing black people being terrorized for fun. Thanks all for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow, about 24 hours. Creator, we ask that you help us deactivate our white chips. Aid us in not sympathizing with our enemies, whites. Racist man, racist woman, racist child. We should never feel bad for them, feel sorry for them under any circumstances, for any reason. Help us to overcome our apprehension about confronting, opposing racist man, racist child, racist woman. Help us acknowledge our fears and work to overcome them, to do what needs to be done to solve this problem. Aid us day by day in reducing the anxiety we might have and using our words, formulating questions to respond, counter what racists attempt to do to us each and every day with deceptive words. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice as soon as possible. Ashe. Context of white supremacy. Signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
I'm a victim, brother.
You're a victim.
I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.